Chapter 745. When Xiao Wanru came back, it was already late. She walked past Xiao Caihuan's room and heard the sound of laughter inside. After entering the room and washing up a little, she heard Xiao Caihuan's maid coming over to invite her over. Xiao Wanru took Yujie to Xiao Caihuan's room. As soon as she entered the room, she found that there were quite a lot of people inside. There were 5 of them. Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Yanru were both there. Wang Yusin and the other 2 misses, who were also candidates for the consort selection in the past few days, were also here. Incense was burning in the air, the kind that Xiao Caihuan liked to use in the past. The treatment of the beauties was quite good. There was incense distributed in the palace, and they could choose the incense they liked. Xiao Caihuan liked this kind of incense. "Fifth sister, come here quickly." Seeing Xiao Wanru coming over, Xiao Caihuan introduced her affectionately to the 2 young ladies who were not familiar with her. "This is my 5th sister." Then she said to Xiao Wanru with a smile, "This is Miss D, Miss Yu, and Miss Wang. You know them." "Greetings, Miss D, Miss Yu, Miss Wang." Xiao Wanru came over gracefully, bowed, and then sat down on one side. The smell of incense in the air was very strong. She came the latest, so she happened to sit next to the incense. Xiao Wanru looked up at the incense burner on the table beside her. It was the same kind of incense burner as hers. It was exquisite with the luxury of the royal family. From the nozzle on the top of the burner, a curling fragrance slowly overflowed from it. "Third sister, what incense did you use today? It smells so good." Xiao Wanru asked. She stood up and seemed to be about to lift the lid of the incense burner. "Fifth younger sister, it's just the plum blossom leaf incense that third younger sister likes. If fifth younger sister likes it, you can also pick these next time. I just don't know when fifth younger sister started to like this smell. Isn't fifth sister not very interested in these things in the past?" Xiao Yanru said with a soft smile on her side. Hearing her words, Xiao Caihuan also smiled and reached out to pull her. "Sit down. What's wrong with you today? Why do you suddenly care about my incense? I've never seen you ask this question in the past." Xiao Wanru sat down as she was told and did not insist. She just looked at the incense burner with a smile and said, "It has never been so strong in the past. Can't you smell it?" The young ladies looked at each other and shook their heads. "No. Isn't it the same as before? Why is it so intense this time? The smell of plum is the lightest among all the incense, and it's the most pleasant. How can it be so strong? Is there something wrong with fifth Miss Nose?" Wang Yusin said with a sarcastic smile, but she was secretly vigilant in her heart. She didn't expect Xiao Wanru's nose to be so good that she could smell a much stronger smell. Maybe the misses have been in the room for a long time, so they didn't find it. If they came in like me, they would definitely smell something different. This fragrance is really strange. Xiao Wanru frowned with her beautiful willowy eyebrows and said with a strange look. Hearing this, Miss Yu stood up. "I'll try." She turned around and walked out of the door. After standing outside the door for a while, when she came back in, she also frowned. "This smell seems really, not quite right. It's really fragrant. Is that so? I'll also go out and try." Another young lady also stood up with a smile and walked out of the door. "Is it really so magical?" This time, even Xiao Caihuan was interested. She followed the crowd out of the door. Wang Yusin's face turned livid, and her fingers trembled slightly. Xiao Yanru's face looked calm. She looked at the people coming in and out of the door with a smile and didn't blame them. She looked like a steady first miss, much more dignified and decent than those who went out. Seeing Xiao Yanru's expression, the 2 young ladies felt embarrassed. After sitting down, it was inappropriate for them to discuss what had happened just now. They were all ladies from aristocratic families and had entered the palace for the consort selection. How could they be persuaded so easily? Maybe the fragrance in the room was not so fragrant. It was the same as before, but they smelled different because of their own thoughts when they went in and out of the room just now. It was all a psychological effect. It was nothing. Besides, the incense that had been lit for a while was certainly different from the incense that had been lit for a while. It was lit just now, and it was a little faint when I came in. Now it has been lit for a while, so it's naturally much stronger. Miss Yu was the first to speak. She was the first to go out just now. At this time, when she saw Xiao Yenru's appearance, she felt deeply ashamed and felt that she was not magnanimous enough, so she quickly made up for it. Since she said so, the others also agreed. They all felt that even if the smell was too strong, it was not a big deal. Xiao Wanru came late, so the smell was naturally much stronger when she came in. Xiao Wanru ignored them. She just frowned and closed her eyes slightly, as if she was very uncomfortable, but she suppressed it. Fifth sister, what's wrong? Xiao Caihuan finally noticed Xiao Wanru's abnormality and asked. Fifth sister, do you feel uncomfortable? Xiao Yenru also asked with concern. I feel a little uncomfortable. Xiao Wanru frowned tightly and held the handkerchief in her hand so hard that the blue veins on her hands stood out. What's wrong with you? Xiao Yenru asked hurriedly. She stood up and walked up to Xiao Wanru. I don't know. Xiao Wanru's delicate little face was wrinkled, and her face was a little pale. Do you want to call an imperial physician? Xiao Yenru asked nervously and looked a little flustered. Although she was asking Xiao Wanru, she was looking at Xiao Caihuan. Xiao Caihuan hesitated. They were in the palace, and they were in the consort selection. Besides, it was so late. If they really went to the nanny in charge and then went to call an imperial physician, the matter would definitely be blown up. At that time, it would be out of control. Not to mention Xiao Wanru, all of them present would be in trouble. Well, let's wait first. Maybe it's nothing. Xiao Caihuan said hesitantly. This room was still her room. If they really made a scene, she would be the most responsible. She even blamed Wang Yusin at this time. If it weren't for Wang Yusin, the others wouldn't have come with her, and Xiao Wanru wouldn't have had an accident here. But she looks very bad. Miss Yu was a little timid. Looking at Xiao Wanru covering her chest in discomfort, she said anxiously, how about, we ask the nanny in charge to come and ask her to call an imperial physician? No. If the nanny in charge comes, she will definitely scold us. If it gets worse, she may even drive all of us out of the palace. Wang Yusin shook her head repeatedly and stopped her. The ladies who stayed in the consort selection were all likely to be selected. Even though Xiao Caihuan didn't have any idea at first, since she stayed, she felt that it was not entirely impossible for her to be selected. If she was sent out of the palace at this time, she would be laughed at and looked down upon by others in the future. Even if she couldn't marry one of the princes, she couldn't ruin her reputation. Xiao Caihuan was not young. If she didn't get selected this time, she would definitely get engaged immediately. At this time, she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Let's let fifth sister go back to rest first. She should be fine. What do you think, big sister? Even though Xiao Caihuan thought so in her heart, she wouldn't take it all on herself. It was best to push it to Xiao Yenru at this time. Xiao Yenru hesitated, looking frightened and unable to make up her mind. Let's take fifth miss back to rest first. It won't be too late to call an imperial physician later if something happens. It would be best if she is fine. Miss D also said. Okay, let's do that. Xiao Caihuan, the owner of the room, made the final decision. She turned to Xiao Wanru and said, Fifth sister, shall we help you to rest first? Xiao Wanru's eyes were as cold as snow. If something really happened, there was a big difference between calling an imperial physician earlier and later. All the people present were smart, but they didn't seem to understand what she meant. Some people pretended to be confused, while some people were selfish and just wanted to get away. Xiao Caihuan used to be a generous and peaceful girl, but she didn't expect that she would be so selfish after being forced. Delusional? Originally, she thought that Xiao Zaihuan could see clearly that she stayed just to save face for Duke Xing's mansion, but she didn't expect that she would be delusional and have new expectations. She wanted to find out whether Xiao Yanru had planned to give her the protective talisman before, or whether Xiao Yanru knew something and took advantage of the situation. She raised the corners of her mouth silently with a sarcastic smile, and then raised her head weakly and said, "Sorry to trouble you, third sister. Don't mention it. We are sisters. Don't say it's troublesome. We're just sisters." Xiao Zaihuan came over to help her. "Third miss, let me do it." Yujie stepped forward and helped Xiao Wanru to get up and walk to the door. Several misses walked her to the door worriedly. "Big sister, third sister, please wait. I'm fine, but I feel uncomfortable all over, as if there is something wrong. I feel better when I go out." Xiao Wanru said softly to Xiao Yanru and Xiao Zaihuan, who followed her with concern and anxiety. "Fifth sister, if you feel uncomfortable later, you must come and tell me. No matter how late it is, I will definitely ask the nanny in charge to call an imperial physician." Xiao Yanru said with a serious face. "Yes, fifth sister, you go to have a rest first." Xiao Zaihuan nodded repeatedly and repeatedly told Yujie to pay attention to Xiao Wanru's health. If there was anything wrong, she should report it immediately. The two sisters expressed their concern in words. No matter what the other three thought, they also showed great concern at this time. After Yujie helped Xiao Wanru into the room, several misses returned to Xiao Zaihuan's room. At this time, everyone was in no mood. Looking at the sky outside, Wang Yusin, Miss D, and Miss Yu all got up and said goodbye. Third miss. Before they left, Yujie came in from the door and bowed to Xiao Zaihuan. "Why don't you go to serve your miss?" Xiao Zaihuan frowned and said unhappily. "Miss asked me to come and have a look. She always feels that the smell of incense in your room is very strange." Yujie said. Chapter 746. "Hey, what are you talking about? What do you mean that the incense in third Miss Xiao's place is strange? Is there something wrong with the incense given by the imperial palace?" Wang Yusin raised her eyebrows and scolded angrily. "Your master is not feeling well at this time, and her mind is a little confused. Go back first." Xiao Yanru also looked unhappy. Although her voice was gentle, everyone could hear the impatience in her tone. "Miss Wang, my master said that there might be something wrong with the incense. Why are you so nervous? Even if there is something wrong, it has nothing to do with you. It's really strange that you cover it up." Yujie ignored the threat in Wang Yusin's words and said. After that, she turned around and walked to the table with the incense. Xiao Yanru felt that something was wrong and hurried forward to stop her, but Yujie dodged her dexterously. Yujie walked to the desk, opened the lid of the incense burner, looked inside, and said in surprise, "Third miss, you used 2 pieces of incense. No wonder the smell is so strong. My master may feel uncomfortable because of the strong incense. The incense she uses has always been weak." Yujie put down the lid in her hand and pointed to the incense burner. Wang Yusin's fingers trembled, and she looked panicked. "You used 2 pieces of incense?" Xiao Zaihuan looked at her maid. The maid was so scared that she shook her hands and said, "Miss, I didn't use 2 pieces of incense. I only used 1 piece of incense as usual. The amount of incense distributed was not much. Because the misses were basically not around during the day, the incense was often lit at night. The smell was fresh and natural, so many misses went to bed at night." Xiao Zaihuan did the same. "Why are there 2 pieces of incense?" Xiao Zaihuan also walked over and took a look at the incense burner. Sure enough, there were 2 pieces of incense in it. It could be seen clearly that the 2 pieces of incense were staggered, and the one on top was crooked. It seemed that it was not properly placed. Several others also came forward and looked at Xiao Zaihuan's maid suspiciously after a glance. Only the maid was the one who lit the incense burner. "Miss, it's not me. It's really not me. The servant girl was so scared that she knelt down with a plop and waved her hands. It was not a big deal to light one more piece of incense, but if Fifth Miss was implicated because she was not feeling well, she would have to bear the consequences. If it's not you, who else could it be? You're the only one who touched this incense. Could it be that you want to harm our miss? Yu Jie said angrily. After speaking, she looked at Xiao Caihuan, and the suspicion in her eyes made Xiao Caihuan's heart beat fiercely. If it was really done by her maid, she, as the master, could not absolve herself from the guilt. Just now, she should have let Xiao Wanru have a look at it before leaving. At least in this way, she could dispel part of her suspicion. Tell me, what's going on? Xiao Caihuan glanced at Xiao Yanru and slammed her hand on the table. She suspected Xiao Yanru. If there was one person here who definitely didn't want to make Xiao Wanru happy, it was Xiao Yanru. Miss, I didn't. I really didn't do anything. The servant girl was shocked and flustered, and burst into tears. If you don't explain it to me today, you can forget about leaving the palace. No one can save you if you commit a crime in the palace. Xiao Caihuan was really angry, and her face was as dark as water. She realized that she might have fallen into a trap. If Xiao Wanru really had an accident because of the incense she lit, then she would definitely not be able to escape. I didn't. I put a piece of incense when I lit it. I remember it clearly. The servant girl burst into tears. She did remember it clearly. There were only a few pieces of incense in total, and they were brought here before. How could there be 2 pieces of incense? However, she did touch the incense burner, and no one had touched it. Thinking of this, the servant girl suddenly remembered something. She wiped away her tears, pointed to a servant girl hiding behind Wang Yusin, and shouted excitedly, "Miss, another person has touched it, and so has Miss Wang's servant girl." When? Xiao Caihuan turned her head in surprise and looked at Wang Yusin coldly. She only felt her heart suddenly beat twice, and her neck felt a little uncomfortable. When Miss Wang came in, I went to make tea. When I came back, I saw Miss Wang's servant girl standing beside the incense burner with the lid in her hand. At that time, Miss Wang hadn't sat down yet, so she happened to block your view. The servant girl pointed angrily at the servant girl hiding behind Wang Yusin and said. She had been wondering why Miss Wang hadn't sat down for so long after she came in. When she saw this servant girl lift the lid of her incense burner, she felt that both this servant girl and her master were not well behaved. Now she suddenly realized that it was Miss Wang who had done something, but she wanted to make her a scapegoat. Miss Wang's servant girl touched the incense burner. Xiao Caihuan said with a gloomy face. She must find out about this matter. If something really happened to Xiao Wanru, she had to explain it clearly if she wanted to get away. I didn't know there was such a thing. It's impossible. Wang Yusin hated her in her heart, but she had to say, could it be that your servant girl made a mistake or is trying to shirk responsibility? Miss Wang, if something really happens to Fifth Sister, you can't get away with it. That day, you had a dispute with Fifth Sister here, and finally parted on bad terms. What do you want to do to Fifth Sister this time? Xiao Caihuan was not stupid, and it could even be said that she had always been smart. The second branch of Duke Xing's mansion had always been strong, but that was all. The third branch, which could live well under the suppression of Madame of Duke Xing, had never been stupid. They just hid their weaknesses. But now Xiao Caihuan couldn't hide it anymore. She glanced at the incense burner on the table, took a deep breath, and glanced at everyone present. Not only Miss Wang, but also Big Sister, Miss D, and Miss You can't get away with it, and so can I. Do you all know what kind of person Rui and Great Elder Princess is? If something happens to Fifth Sister, I don't know what Rui and Great Elder Princess will do, but I'm afraid that all of us will be in trouble. Xiao Caihuan suddenly dragged everyone down with her. Everyone would be in trouble, or in other words, not only would they have no hope of being selected, but they would also lose their lives. What does this have to do with us? Besides, Great Elder Princess has to be reasonable. Miss Yu was the first to show her fear and said in panic. Great Elder Princess only has one granddaughter, 5th Mississippi. If she slashes or stabs your faces to avenge our miss, as long as she doesn't kill you, Empress Dowager won't really blame her. Yu Jie sneered and helped Xiao Caihuan increase the bargaining chips. What Miss said was right. If 3rd Miss was forced, she would definitely drag everyone down with her. If today's matter couldn't be investigated clearly, no one would be able to leave. In fact, the misses present didn't believe that Great Elder Princess would kill them, but if they were really disfigured or injured, they really couldn't ask Great Elder Princess to take the blame. They could only say that Great Elder Princess was so angry that she accidentally injured them, and then they could get away with it. It was inconvenient for others to come to the palace, but it was entirely possible for Rui and Great Elder Princess to come over. As long as something happened to Xiao Wanru, Rui and Great Elder Princess would definitely come over. It was said that Rui and Great Elder Princess doted on her granddaughter very much and was extremely overbearing and unkind. This time, even Xiao Yanru's face turned pale. She faintly felt that something was wrong. She shouldn't have come today. Although she knew that this matter had nothing to do with her and it was impossible to find out that she was involved in it, she came here today just to watch the fun. Unexpectedly, she got involved in it. Of course, she was not satisfied with the result. Xiao Yanru had always been careful, so how could she let others have something on her? 3rd sister, this matter really has nothing to do with us. Since it has something to do with Miss Wang's servant girl, send this servant girl to the nanny in charge. It's best if 5th sister is fine, but if there's something wrong, let the nanny in charge investigate this servant girl. We can all testify. Xiao Yanru stood up and said with a serious face. Yu Jie could see clearly that the 1st miss, who had tried to protect herself before, stood up and spoke because she couldn't sit still anymore. Sure enough, the 1st miss's words were still as fair as she had expected. Yes, that's it. This servant girl really doesn't look right. She looks very guilty. Miss Wang, don't tell me you've also been deceived. Where did this servant girl come from? The others nodded, and their eyes fell on the servant girl behind Wang Yusin. The servant girl was trembling and looked at Wang Yusin imploringly. Being stared at by so many people, Wang Yusin was really flustered, but she tried to pretend not to be afraid and said, "What are you doing? The 5th miss may be fine now. Why are you panicking first? I brought this servant girl from my mansion. She is very loyal and would never do such a thing." Although she acted as a guarantor for the servant girl, she still felt guilty. However, thinking that it was not a big deal and Rui and Great Elder Princess would not kill her for such a thing, she felt a little relieved. She just wanted Xiao Wanru to have a few blisters. There were so many good medicines in the Imperial Palace, which didn't even leave a scar. Was it necessary to be so calculative? Miss Wang, do you admit it? Yu Jie said aggressively. This was not something that a servant girl like her should say, nor would a servant girl interrupt unruly at this time. However, because she was the victim now and had no reverence for this Miss Wang, she blurted out these words. Wang Yusin wanted to scold Yu Jie for being unruly, but Yu Jie's master was not here at this time. Looking at the others present, she knew that they would not help her at this time, and everyone wanted to shirk the responsibility. Feeling angry and resentful, she could only stomp her feet and say angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? Why don't you take care of your master? How can you still have the mood to make trouble here? Is your master fine?" "Miss Wang, you'd better hope that my master is fine," Yu Jie said coldly and turned to Xiao Caihuan. "3rd miss, the incense burner is yours, so the incense inside should also be yours. Please put away the incense in the incense burner. Otherwise, if you can't explain it clearly, others will only say that it was your fault." Chapter 747. After saying that, Yu Jie turned around and walked out. Xiao Caihuan, who was behind her, immediately understood and winked at her maid. The maid got up and walked quickly to the incense burner, lifted the lid, and put out the incense inside. Xiao Yanru's face darkened. She looked at Xiao Caihuan calmly and then at Wang Yusin, with a bad feeling in her heart. Third Miss Xiao, what do you mean? You really suspect me? How can a maid's words be blamed on me? Although Wang Yusin was flustered, she did not dare to show it on her face. She shouted angrily and tried to maintain her momentum. She must not show a guilty conscience. Xiao Yanru stood up and said with a cold face, Miss Wang, no matter whether you did it or not, the incense in the incense burner must be left. If someone wants to use Fifth Sister's matter to deal with our Duke Xing's mansion, our Duke Xing's mansion will never let it go. She regarded Xiao Wanru's matter as Duke Xing's mansion's matter, and the three sisters of Duke Xing's mansion should be on the same side. Wang Yusin was angry and flustered, but she couldn't say anything at this time. She flicked her sleeves and said, well, if Fifth Miss Xiao is fine, let's see what you are doing. Xiao Wanru left early, and in fact, there might not be bubbles. She had nothing to be afraid of. Moreover, it was just a few small pimples, which was not a big deal. It might be because Xiao Wanru didn't eat the right food, so it was also possible. Thinking of this, Wang Yusin felt less afraid. She turned around and strode away. She had nothing to be afraid of such a small thing. After Wang Yusin left, the others also dispersed. Yujie saw these misses leave through the window, so she went back to report to Xiao Wanru. On the bed in the inner room, Xiao Wanru took off her outer clothes and let her hair down. She leaned against the bed with a high and thick cushion behind her, looking very comfortable. Miss, they all left. Yujie reported. Miss Wang left alone and angrily. The first miss left last. When she walked to the door with the third miss, she comforted the third miss not to worry and should be fine. She also said that if something really happened to you, she would definitely stand on the side of the third miss and you and ask Miss Wang to give an explanation to Duke Xing's mansion. She used Duke Xing's mansion to suppress Wang's mansion and tied the interests of the three people together. No matter what happened to Xiao Wanru, no one would suspect her. Xiao Yanru was really good at scheming. Xiao Yanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and there was a hint of sarcasm on her delicate little face. No matter when, Xiao Yanru would try her best to stay out of trouble. It was others who got into trouble, and she would always be the one who would not arouse suspicion. Unfortunately, how could one not wet their shoes if they often walked by the river? Let's wait. There should be news tomorrow. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, where is that palace maid? Of course, there was no news from her side, but the same could not be said for Xiao Caihuan. Even if they found out early, they would inevitably be hurt. That palace maid said that she would testify, but she said that she didn't want your reward, as long as she could follow you in the future. Yujie said. This palace maid was the one who had reported that Wang Yusin might harm Xiao Wanru. She said that she heard a few words between Wang Yusin and the maid, so she reminded Xiao Wanru to be careful. This palace maid was the one who had followed Xiao Yanru in the last life. Xiao Wanru asked Yujie to ask this palace maid a few more questions in private, and gave her benefits by both carrot and stick, so that she could testify at an appropriate time. She wanted to please Xiao Yanru, but she didn't want to stand out. She looked quite like Xiao Yanru. No wonder Xiao Yanru brought this palace maid to her side after entering the imperial palace in the last life and made her trusted chief palace maid. What did you say? Xiao Wanru asked. I did as you said. I said that you would take her when you had the chance, so she hesitated, Yujie said with disdain. At first glance, she could tell that this palace maid wanted to cling to the rich. It would be best if Xiao Wanru could stay in the imperial palace, but how could Xiao Wanru stay in the imperial palace? I think she just wanted to cling to a new noble in the imperial palace. She took a fancy to you and thought that Xiao Wanru might stay in the imperial palace, Yujie said angrily. Because she was in a hurry just now, she didn't have time to report what had happened to the palace maid. Thinking of it at this time, she became more and more annoyed. The emperor was so old, so Xiao Wanru would not stay in the imperial palace. Later, she was willing to testify. Xiao Wanru had expected this, so she said with a faint look in her eyes. I did as you said and used both carrot and stick. After talking to her for a while, she agreed. Yu Jie said proudly. Xiao Wanru had never seen this palace maid before, but she knew her character very well. What she said almost hit the nail on the head every time. The palace maid had been hesitating, but finally agreed. Xiao Wanru was really more and more powerful. She could even predict the person whom she had never seen so accurately. Go to sleep first. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Xiao Wanru said. She slid down, lay down in the quilt, and slowly closed her eyes. In winter, even if Xiao Caihuan put out the incense tablets, there was still a smell. If there was no ventilation to disperse the smell in the room, the whole room would be shrouded in this smell. The next morning, when Xiao Caihuan got up, she only felt a dull pain in her head. At first, she thought that it was because she didn't sleep well last night and Xiao Wanru's matter had happened. Even if there was an incense tablet in the end, which made people suspicious, Xiao Caihuan was still worried. She thought about it at night and went to bed very late. Ah! Hearing the sound on the bed, the maid lifted the gauze curtain for her. When she saw Xiao Caihuan's face, she was so shocked that she took a step back. The water basin in her hand fell to the ground, making a clear, clang sound. Miss! Miss! The maid looked at Xiao Caihuan on the bed, trembling, and her face was pale. What's wrong? Xiao Caihuan frowned and sobered up. Not only did she feel a dull pain in her head, but she also felt that her face seemed to be covered with something, which made her very uncomfortable. She raised her hand and seemed to want to touch her forehead. Suddenly, she saw two small red bumps on her hand and exclaimed in fright. Then she remembered something and said in a shrill voice, Hurry, hurry up and get the mirror. The maid stepped back in a hurry and almost fell over the basin. She hurriedly turned back to get the mirror. Xiao Caihuan took it, picked it up and looked at it. When she saw many red bumps of various sizes on her face, she screamed in fright. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yanru had already gotten up. Hearing Xiao Caihuan's shrill scream in the middle of the room and then the sound of something being smashed on the ground, the two of them rushed in. Third sister, what happened? Xiao Yanru walked quickly. When she came in and saw Xiao Caihuan's appearance, she was so shocked that she couldn't say a word. Then she subconsciously looked behind her. It was Xiao Wanru behind her. Her fair little face was still as white as snow, delicate and charming, without any blemishes. She got up early today. She had expected that something would happen to Xiao Wanru and that she would not be able to calm down for a while. Unexpectedly, Xiao Caihuan was fine, and the situation seemed to be very serious. Big sister, what's wrong with third sister? Xiao Wanru walked behind Xiao Yanru. Seeing Xiao Yanru stop in front of her, she asked politely. Fifth sister, are you okay? Xiao Yanru couldn't help asking. The one who should be in trouble was not in trouble, but the one who shouldn't be in trouble was in trouble. Even Xiao Yanru panicked at this time. Big sister, shouldn't you pay attention to third sister at this time? Third sister is the one in trouble. What could happen to me? Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru calmly. At this time, Xiao Caihuan was obviously in trouble, but Xiao Yanru still had the heart to ask her, who was not in a hurry and seemed to be fine, which was a little mysterious. Big sister, it's fifth sister who should be in trouble, not me, right? Xiao Caihuan also reacted very quickly. She looked up at Xiao Yanru with fierce and resentful eyes. Xiao Yanru's appearance was too suspicious. Thinking of Xiao Yanru's usual behavior in the mansion, Xiao Caihuan almost immediately determined that it had something to do with Xiao Yanru. Third sister, fifth sister left because she felt uncomfortable yesterday. I wanted to go to see her today, but I didn't expect that she was fine. Instead, third sister, Shuqi, go and ask the nanny in charge to come here. Xiao Yanru hurriedly explained, stepping on the water on the ground and taking a few steps forward. Shuqi answered and ran out. Xiao Wanru came in after Xiao Yanru. Seeing the little red spots bulging on Xiao Zaihuan's face, her eyes became colder and colder. If she hadn't been prepared, she would have been in trouble at this time. The air she exhaled was cold, but her body was burning fiercely. These people were really trying to ruin her by every means possible. If she hadn't come back late yesterday, Wang Yusen would have come to her room to talk about the old days. The incense would have lingered in her room for a long time. With the smell of medicine in the protective talisman, she would have been in trouble. Third sister, only on your face. Are there any on your body? Xiao Wanru reminded her. Xiao Zaihuan reached out to pull down the collar of her neck, and immediately found that there were also some on her neck. She panicked and burst into tears. Third sister, don't worry. The nanny in charge will be here soon. Ask the imperial physician to have a look. I'm sure you'll be fine. Did you eat something yesterday? Why are there all the red spots? Xiao Yenru asked with concern. I didn't eat anything. I ate the same as you yesterday. How could it be? How could it be like this? Xiao Zaihuan cried. Then where did you go yesterday? Some people are allergic to medicinal powder, and some people are allergic to other things. Third sister, are you allergic to something? Xiao Yenru thought for a while and comforted her softly. Third sister, don't worry. The imperial physician will understand after a while. Don't worry. Big sister, what should I do? What if I can't get better? Xiao Zaihuan choked with sobs. She took Xiao Yenru's hand and was eager to find support from her. Third sister, don't be afraid. It will be fine. It will be fine. Xiao Yenru sat by the bed and let Xiao Zaihuan hold her. She hugged Xiao Zaihuan back and said in an increasingly soft voice. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the two sisters who were hugging each other tightly. Her eyes were slightly dim, and a deep smile appeared on her face. Xiao Yenru had calculated everything, but she still made a mistake. Chapter 748. The imperial physician came quickly. When the nanny in charge came over, she invited an imperial physician over. There were many beauties living in Chuxiu Palace. It was easy for accidents to happen in crowded places. In the past, something always happened when the beauties lived here. The Imperial Institute of Medicine specially asked an imperial physician to be on duty here. When the nanny in charge heard the report, she immediately knew that something had happened and immediately came over with the imperial physician. It was the miss of Duke Xing's mansion who had an accident, so the nanny in charge was very flustered. The one who couldn't have an accident was the miss of Duke Xing's mansion. When she got into the room, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Xiao Yenru and Xiao Wanru standing beside her. Fortunately, they were fine. Otherwise, she would be in serious trouble. Both of them had been taken care of. After the imperial physician came over to diagnose and treat Xiao Zaihuan, he frowned. Imperial physician, can I get better? Xiao Zaihuan looked at the imperial physician nervously, for fear that he would say something bad. Well. The imperial physician looked around and said, it seems to be an allergy, but if the allergen is not found, I'm afraid you can't get better for a while. Any allergy would be caused by something. When the cause was unknown, it was difficult to prescribe the right medicine, which was also the difficulty for the imperial physician. So far, he hadn't found anything that could cause an allergy. This room was also very ordinary. How could the beauties who had just lived here for a few days be allergic? The imperial physician glanced at the people present again and felt that it was more likely that it was a man-made disaster. Of course, he didn't dare to say it casually without evidence. What people in the palace were most afraid of was groundless accusations. In addition to the miss lying on the bed whose appearance could no longer be recognized, there were two other misses present. At the sight of their appearance, the imperial physician was both amazed and surprised. He was used to seeing beauties of all sizes in the palace, but he had never seen anyone as smart and outstanding as the two misses in front of him. Even if someone wanted to harm someone, it should be these two misses. The one on the bed was probably not as beautiful as these two misses. Could it be a mistake? Imperial physician, what should we do now? The nanny in charge frowned, looked at Xiao Zaihuan's face, and stepped back carefully. Isn't it contagious? Hearing the supervisor nanny's words, everyone stepped back and looked at Xiao Zaihuan in panic. Even the maid who had been standing next to Xiao Zaihuan stepped back nervously. No one wanted to get infected with this seemingly unknown disease. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru. Others were stepping back, but she still stood by the bed with a concerned look and didn't move. Imperial physician. Is it contagious? Xiao Zaihuan asked in a trembling voice, with tears in her eyes. She was supposed to be charming, but at this time, she not only didn't look pitiful, but also disgusting. It's best to return to the residence and slowly recuperate with medicine. As for the future, it will depend on how well he recuperates. The imperial physician shook his head and said, have you ever had such a situation before? Have you ever had an allergic reaction? No, never. Xiao Zaihuan couldn't hold back her tears when she heard that she was going to be sent back and her future was still unknown. Third sister, what's the difference between you and others in terms of eating and using? If not, think about other aspects. Is there anything unusual? If there is something wrong, tell the imperial physician. Maybe the imperial physician will know. Xiao Wanru reminded her. Third sister, go back to the mansion first. Father and grandmother will definitely cure you. Don't worry. Xiao Yanru also comforted her with concern. Xiao Zaihuan was going to answer Xiao Wanru's question. After hearing Xiao Yanru's words, she immediately thought of her uncertain future and immediately burst into tears. She had no time to answer Xiao Wanru's words. Xiao Wanru suddenly turned to the imperial physician and asked, Imperial physician, will it be bad for my third sister's face if she keeps crying like this? Of course not. The imperial physician nodded. Will it leave a scar on her face? She hasn't taken any medicine, but she still cries like this. Xiao Wanru asked again. Xiao Zaihuan, who was lying on the bed, immediately stopped crying. She stared at the imperial physician nervously, but didn't dare to shed any more tears. Of course it will be affected. Third miss, you'd better not cry. The imperial physician said. Hearing what he said, Xiao Zaihuan didn't dare to cry anymore. She opened her eyes wide and tried her best to stop her tears. Third elder sister, did you notice anything unusual yesterday? We just arrived in the imperial palace and don't know anything. It's also possible that we accidentally bumped into something else and got allergic. Tell the imperial physician. Xiao Wanru urged again. Yes, third miss, can you tell me if there's anything unusual? Without Xiao Zaihuan's crying, the imperial physician heard it clearly and nodded repeatedly. He was at a loss for what to do now. He didn't know why Xiao Zaihuan's face suddenly became like this. If it was an allergy, there must be an allergen. This miss had never had such a situation before. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem to happen naturally. I don't know. Xiao Zaihuan was at a loss at this time and couldn't think of anything. She only felt confused. Imperial physician, since third sister doesn't know anything, you don't have to force her anymore. Xiao Yanru stopped him. Big sister, you have to let third sister think about what's wrong. No matter what kind of allergy it is, it can't be allergic for no reason. When I came here yesterday, I also felt uncomfortable, but when I went back, I was fine. It can be seen that if we find out what she is allergic to, third sister will definitely recover. Xiao Wanru said. Yes, the extra aromatherapy tablet. Miss Wang's. Before Xiao Zaihuan could react, her maid had already exclaimed excitedly. What aromatherapy tablet? The nanny in charge asked anxiously with a stern face. It was just that an accidental allergy was completely different from being framed. Yesterday, Miss Wang Yusin came over, and her maid put an aromatherapy tablet in my incense burner. Fifth sister stayed for a while and said she felt uncomfortable, so she went back. After I found out, I took it out. Xiao Caihuan also remembered this matter at this time and said hurriedly. Last night, she had felt that something was wrong, but it was Xiao Wanru's fault, so she was not very anxious. She didn't expect that it would fall on her today. She stared at the imperial physician eagerly. The imperial physician thought for a moment and said, "Is the aromatherapy tablet still here?" "Yes, yes, go and get it." Xiao Caihuan hurriedly ordered the maid. The maid brought the aromatherapy tablet over. The imperial physician took it, looked at it, put it to his nose and sniffed it. He frowned tightly. "Imperial physician, is there anything wrong?" Xiao Caihuan asked anxiously. Xiao Wanru squinted at Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru's face was not very good, but it was normal at the moment. Only Xiao Wanru could see clearly that Xiao Yanru's face was not so nervous before, and she sneered in her heart. Where did this aromatherapy tablet come from? The nanny in charge also saw something wrong and asked. It's from Wang Yusin, the daughter of the left assistant minister. She came to visit me yesterday, and her maid secretly put this aromatherapy tablet in my incense burner. All the misses present at that time can testify. Xiao Caihuan said angrily and turned to look at Xiao Yanru. Big sister, you were also there at that time and saw it, right? Xiao Wanru had left at that time. Yujie, as a maid, could not prove anything. Only Xiao Yanru could prove it. Everyone turned to look at Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru lowered her head uneasily and looked a little at a loss. First Miss Xiao, what did you see? Please tell us clearly. The nanny in charge asked with her face darkening. I actually don't know. Third sister's maid said that she saw Miss Wang's maid and said that Miss Wang's maid did it. Xiao Yanru said in embarrassment. His words were very flexible. He didn't say yes or no. Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked, Big sister, although Miss Wang did not admit that it was her maid who did it, didn't all the misses agree to testify? In this room, only she had been paying attention to Xiao Yanru's subtle changes. Although what happened yesterday happened after she left, Yujie saw it clearly and reported it to Xiao Wanru after going back. It was not strange for Xiao Wanru to say so now. Yes, big sister, those misses were all there. They told you that they were willing to testify. Hearing her words, Xiao Caihuan immediately said. Now she was like a person holding on to driftwood, holding on to Xiao Yanru tightly, as if only Xiao Yanru could prove what she said. Her words were very difficult to answer. Whether she said yes or no, it was easy to offend others and involve herself in it. Xiao Yanru was absolutely unwilling to be involved in it. She really didn't want to answer this question, but everyone else in the room was looking at her, so she had to answer Xiao Caihuan's words. Xiao Yanru thought for a while and said, it's better to wait for the other two misses to come together. Her words made sense. The nanny in charge nodded, turned around, and ordered a palace maid standing behind her, go and invite the other misses over. The imperial physician picked some common allergy medicine for Xiao Caihuan and asked her to apply the ointment first. The nanny in charge and the imperial physician retreated to the outer room, while Xiao Yanru and Xiao Wanru stayed. Yujie, ask the imperial physician if it's contagious. Xiao Wanru ordered in a low voice. Yujie nodded and walked out. Xiao Yanru, who had been sitting at the head of Xiao Caihuan's bed with the ointment in her hand, paused, but then looked at Xiao Caihuan calmly and said, Third sister, lie down, close your eyes, and be careful. I'll help you apply the ointment. Xiao Caihuan also heard Xiao Wanru's words. She glanced at Xiao Wanru angrily and closed her eyes. She had a very bad impression of Xiao Wanru. As expected, they were not sisters who grew up together in the mansion and didn't have much sisterly affection for her. Xiao Yanru had mentioned it just now, but now she still asked about it. Xiao Yanru was afraid that she would infect her. She really couldn't like her. No wonder no one in the whole mansion liked her. But why did she have an accident instead of Xiao Wanru? Obviously, "Miss, the imperial physician said that it should be an allergy and not contagious." Yu Jie turned in and whispered to Xiao Wanru. It was very quiet in the room, and everyone heard it clearly. Xiao Caihuan opened her eyes again and glared at Xiao Wanru angrily. But the next moment, she suddenly turned around and glared at Xiao Yenru. Chapter 749. Fortunately, it's not contagious. I really thought it was contagious when I saw third sister's face. Just now, I saw that the nanny in charge and several maids were so scared that they stepped back. Even the imperial physician stepped forward cautiously. Only big sister held the three sisters tightly. Now you feed them the decoction in person. You're really considerate. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, with a trace of fear. She was the youngest of the sisters, so her fearful look was quite adorable. She was not as bright and beautiful as she was in the past, but more childish, as if she was really frightened. Xiao Caihuan was attracted by her appearance at first, and then she suddenly turned her head, looked at Xiao Yenru angrily, gritted her teeth and said with hatred, "Big sister, I don't know when you've been so kind." She inexplicably got red spots all over her body, which was painful and itchy. Even she didn't know whether it was contagious. In particular, the imperial physician was very careful before treating her. How could Xiao Yenru suddenly be so kind to her? She didn't avoid the possibility that she might be contagious and took the initiative to serve her. Outsiders might think that Xiao Yenru was indeed such a dignified, decent, and protective sister. No matter whether she would be hurt or not, she would protect her sister. Xiao Caihuan was a member of Duke Xing's mansion, and the third branch had always been suppressed by the second branch. Among the sisters of Duke Xing's mansion, Xiao Yenru was a powerful one, and no one dared to provoke her. They all knew that this big sister was very cruel and merciless. Besides, she was good at doing things behind others' backs. If Xiao Caihuan might really be contagious, Xiao Yenru wouldn't have approached her at all, let alone held Xiao Caihuan and cried. She even wiped the red spots in person. How could Xiao Yenru do such a thing, unless she knew that these were not poisonous? But how could she know? If she didn't participate in it, how could she know? It was normal for others to avoid it, but Xiao Yenru was abnormal. It must be her who wanted to hurt her. As for why, Xiao Caihuan immediately thought of the reason. Now the backyard of Duke Xing's mansion was under her mother's control. Xiao Yenru was not convinced, so she did this. Xiao Caihuan was so angry that her fingers trembled slightly. In her excitement, Xiao Caihuan had forgotten her mother's instructions and slapped Xiao Yenru hard in the face. She couldn't bear the fact that she might be disfigured for a while. At this time, she finally found a way to vent her anger. "Xiao Yenru, you bitch, you, how dare you set me up like this? If I don't tear your face apart, let's see how you can go out and hook up with other people." Xiao Yenru wavered between Prince Yu and Prince Shou. Xiao Caihuan also learned from the third madam that the third branch naturally participated in the discussion, which was related to the choice of the whole Duke Xing's mansion. In fact, it was not Xiao Yenru's problem alone. But now Xiao Caihuan had no time to care about it. She raised her hand, grabbed Xiao Yenru's hair bun, and pulled it over fiercely. Xiao Yenru didn't expect that Xiao Caihuan would suddenly go crazy. She was caught off guard and her scalp hurt because of the pull. Seeing that the situation was not good, Shuqi hurriedly came over and pulled Xiao Caihuan's hand. However, Xiao Caihuan, who had determined that she was set up and that Xiao Yenru was also involved, refused to let go. She desperately tried to stretch out the other hand to scratch Xiao Yenru's face, but her hand was held tightly by Shuqi, who prevented her from touching Xiao Yenru. Xiao Yenru took advantage of the time when Shuqi held Xiao Caihuan's hand and pinched the back of Xiao Caihuan's other hand hard. Xiao Caihuan felt the pain and her hand went limp. Xiao Yenru staggered away from the edge of the bed and fell to the ground in embarrassment. "What's going on?" The nanny in charge came in because the sound of fighting inside was too loud. As soon as she came in, she saw Xiao Caihuan struggling on the bed and trying to pounce on Xiao Yenru. Then she saw that Xiao Yanru's hair was messy and there was a palm print on her white and tender face. She fell to the ground full of water and even her clothes were dirty. She immediately flew into a rage. "Nanny, she set me up. She set me up. Please help me." Xiao Caihuan calmed down a little and cried loudly to the nanny in charge. She glared at Xiao Yanru with resentment. If it weren't for Shuqi holding her tightly, she would have pounced on the ground and scratched Xiao Yanru's face. Anyway, it was impossible for her to participate in the show anymore, so they didn't have to do it anymore. Xiao Yanru didn't expect such a change. She had intended to dispel Xiao Caihuan's suspicion, but she didn't expect that Xiao Caihuan would make herself look like this. But now it was not the time to quarrel with Xiao Caihuan. She looked up at Xiao Caihuan with tears in her eyes and said, "Third sister, what are you doing? Why did you suddenly become like this? Could it be that you..." Xiao Yanru shrank back timidly when she said this. The meaning of her words was clear even if it was not clear. She meant that Xiao Caihuan couldn't stand the blow and suddenly went crazy. The nanny in charge looked at Xiao Yanru and then at Xiao Caihuan, who was about to pounce on Xiao Caihuan crazily. Xiao Caihuan really looked like a crazy woman. Coupled with the red marks on her face, the beauty on her face had already been swollen. She looked like she was really crazy. "Someone." The nanny in charge said coldly and was about to ask someone to gag Xiao Caihuan's mouth. A miss who couldn't participate in the show and was not the main branch of Duke Xing's mansion was not a big deal. If she behaved well, she could be sent out of the mansion by the imperial physician. If she was in such a state, it was not a big deal to gag her mouth and throw her out of the palace. "Third sister, if you continue to do this, Nanny will really think that you are crazy. There is no need to investigate what will happen next. Third sister will also be thrown out of the palace." Xiao Wanru raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Caihuan calmly. When the two sisters were fighting, she didn't step forward but just looked at them quietly with a trace of darkness flashing across her eyes. Xiao Yanru must have known about it and even planned it, but did Xiao Caihuan really know nothing about it? Her watery eyes glanced over the bed, which was messy because of the fight, and a familiar thing appeared under the pillow of the bed. Although it was only a corner, Xiao Wanru immediately recognized that it was a protective talisman. Protective talismans were usually hung on the body, so how could they only be placed at the head of the bed? However, since it was placed at the head of the bed, it meant that Xiao Caihuan didn't know much about it and thought that it would be fine as long as she didn't wear it. The protective talisman, which she had painstakingly asked for and spent a lot of money on, was just placed under the pillow. It was really hard to believe what Xiao Caihuan had said to her before. The two protective talismans were drugged together. In order to keep the matter confidential, she naturally couldn't let Xiao Caihuan know. Although her protective talisman was drugged, so was Xiao Caihuan's protective talisman. Wang Yusin must have come to find her, and then she took the opportunity to put the incense in her incense burner, so that she would be the victim. Unfortunately, she hadn't come back yet. Wang Yusin should have been to Xiao Yanru's room. Xiao Yanru was afraid of getting into trouble, so she asked her to go to Xiao Caihuan's room, and then when she came back, she invited her over. Wang Yusin had been drugged in Xiao Caihuan's room, so Xiao Yanru couldn't be blamed for it. From this, it could be concluded that Wang Yusin didn't know that the real mastermind behind it was Xiao Yanru, so that when she couldn't enter her room, she went to Xiao Caihuan's room and put the incense in it instead of putting it in her incense burner. Everyone knew something more or less, but it was not comprehensive, so that the whole thing had nothing to do with the mastermind. Of course, if Xiao Yanru hadn't been too eager to show her sisterhood with Xiao Caihuan just now, Xiao Caihuan wouldn't have found out. In the past, even if Xiao Caihuan found out that Xiao Yanru had done something in it, she didn't dare to do anything to Xiao Yanru face to face. But today, Xiao Caihuan was out of control. At this time, any little suspicion could be infinitely magnified. Xiao Wanru was waiting for this opportunity. She took a few steps forward, took Xiao Caihuan's hand from Shuqi's, and warned her, "Third sister, if you want to avenge yourself and ask for an explanation, you must calm down. This is the Imperial Palace, not Duke Xing's mansion. Her cold eyes fell on Xiao Caihuan's face. There seemed to be ice and snow in her eyes. Seeing her figure in those bright watery eyes, Xiao Caihuan couldn't help shuddering and immediately sobered up. Looking at the stern face of the nanny in charge, and then at Xiao Yanru, who was slowly getting up with the help of Shuqi and looked embarrassed, Xiao Caihuan suddenly had an idea. She restrained the madness on her face and said with tears in her eyes, "Nanny, my big sister may have colluded with the person who framed me, so I couldn't control myself." After saying that, she burst into tears again. This time, she didn't scream crazily or rush over ferociously. She lowered her head and no one could see the red spots on her face, which made her look extremely pitiful. No matter whether her face was ruined or not, she couldn't be selected for the beauty contest. Thinking of the beautiful face she had seen before, the nanny in charge could only sigh helplessly. Originally, the third Miss Xiao's appearance could be regarded as superior, and she might have a chance, but now it was impossible. Whether it has something to do with your big sister or not, we'd better wait and see. Apply the medicine by yourself first. After that, get up and talk outside. The nanny in charge looked at her and said. After saying that, she turned around and went out. This was extremely rude, but the nanny in charge really didn't need to care too much about a beauty who couldn't be selected. Now she was still helping to ask about it for the sake of Duke Xing's mansion. Seeing the nanny in charge's contempt, Xiao Caihuan was so angry that her face changed dramatically. She slapped the edge of the bed hard, and then turned her eyes to Xiao Yanru, who had just gotten up. She vented all her anger on Xiao Yanru, gnashed her teeth and said, "My good big sister, you are so kind. In order to promote yourself to the position of princess consort, you really do everything." Xiao Yanru had never been so aggrieved, but she also knew that she couldn't reason with Xiao Caihuan at this time. She glanced at Xiao Wanru's face coldly and examined her for a while. She always felt that Xiao Wanru's previous words were not accidental. Did Xiao Wanru know something? If so, she needed to be more careful. Xiao Caihuan's big reaction was unexpected. She had to find a way to spread the news. Chapter 750. Compared with Xiao Caihuan, she cared more about Xiao Wanru. However, Xiao Wanru was lowering her head to apply medicine for Xiao Caihuan with her watery eyes half closed, as if she didn't notice that Xiao Yanru was looking at her. "Third sister, I'll go outside first. Come out after you're done. You can't write 2 Xiao characters in one stroke. Since I'm your elder sister, I won't hurt you. I'll definitely help you catch the real murderer." Xiao Yanru said softly, as if she didn't take Xiao Caihuan's offense to heart. "I'm going to change my clothes first. Big sister, let me go with you." Xiao Wanru put down the medicine in her hand and said. Xiao Yanru's face darkened, and her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face silently and sharply. Xiao Wanru looked at her without avoiding her eyes. "Thank you, fifth sister. Someone needs to take care of third sister. You can stay here." After a long while, Xiao Yanru showed a smile on her face, which was as soft as ever. She had come to her senses at this time, so she wouldn't do anything rude again. "Big sister, let fifth sister accompany you. I'm worried about you going there alone. I was too angry and rude just now." Xiao Caihuan gritted her teeth and said coldly. She also saw something wrong and didn't want Xiao Yanru to have time to do something against her or destroy any evidence. Xiao Yanru looked at Xiao Wanru and then at Xiao Caihuan, who looked resentful. Knowing that she couldn't get away at this time, she frowned and said, "In this case, I'll have to trouble you, fifth sister." With that, she turned around and walked out. "Fifth sister, follow her," Xiao Caihuan said. Xiao Wanru nodded, followed Xiao Yanru out of the inner room and went outside. Miss Yu and Miss D had already arrived in the outer room, and they stood aside with fear. Only Wang Yusin hadn't arrived yet. Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at the faces of the people in the room and followed Xiao Yanru out. Not far from the porch, there were palace maids cleaning the place. Xiao Wanru did not follow Xiao Yenru into the room, but stood outside the door in the corridor. Her eyes fell on the face of a palace maid who was cleaning the ground outside. Seeing that the maid looked around and found no one paying attention to her, she was about to turn back. However, when she turned her eyes, she suddenly met Xiao Wanru's eyes and couldn't help shivering. Xiao Wanru walked over slowly. The palace maid lowered her head and stood on the side of the road, not daring to move. Although the fifth Miss Xiao looked young, her momentum made the palace maids more and more afraid to move. I heard that your name is Han Dan. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Han Dan, the palace maid. Yes, this servant is. Han Dan bowed her head respectfully. Xiao Wanru looked at her silently. The feeling of being seen through made Han Dan's heart in her throat. It was not until a long time later that her burning gaze disappeared. But before she could breathe a sigh of relief, Xiao Wanru's words came into her ears, which almost made her fall to the ground. If the grass on the wall of the palace becomes the grass on the wall, it will definitely be uprooted by the wind in the end. Xiao Wanru said slowly, turned around and walked back slowly. Han Dan stood where she was with cold hands and feet. She looked at the fifth Miss Xiao, who was gradually going away, in horror, and her hand holding the broom trembled slightly. Before things became clear, she really wanted to please these two young ladies and benefit from both sides. Before these two young ladies became famous, this was actually a very good method. Many people in the palace would do the same. They would not expose all their cards and bet them all on a young lady who had not yet made a name for herself. In fact, besides Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yenru, she also liked another Mississippi. The first step was to send some news to these misses and keep a good relationship with them. But now Han Dan did not dare to do that. The maid of the fifth Miss Xiao had suppressed her before. Although she promised to testify, she was still hesitant. Now Xiao Wanru's words made her mind clear, so how could she not panic? The fifth Miss Xiao returned to the corridor and did not glance at her again, but she still felt that her gaze seemed to be there all the time. She did not dare to arouse her suspicion at this time and really arouse her disgust. Originally, at this time, she would go to the back of the room to see if the first Miss Xiao had sent out any news. When she was in the corridor just now, she saw the maid of the first Miss Xiao make a hint to her. She moved the broom in her hand a few times and began to sweep. She did not dare to look up at the corridor again. The fifth Miss Xiao was standing in the corridor, and she did not dare to look back. Xiao Wanru did not wait at the door for a long time. Xiao Yenru changed her clothes again and came out, and then the two of them went to the middle room together. As soon as they entered the room, they heard hurried footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw Wang Yusin and a maid appear at the door with an extremely gloomy face. Wang Yusin's eyes suddenly fell on Xiao Wanru's intact face. Seeing that there was nothing unusual on her face, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When the nanny in charge sent someone to tell her, she did not make it clear, so she thought that there was something wrong with Xiao Wanru's face. Now that there was nothing wrong, she felt relaxed. She took a few steps forward and bowed to the nanny in charge. Seeing that everyone was here, the nanny in charge coughed in a low voice and looked sharply at Wang Yusin. "Miss Wang, tell me why you put incense in the censer yesterday." She went straight to the point. She had asked the other two misses before and knew the reason for what happened last night. "Nanny, I didn't ask anyone to put incense in the censer. I don't know what happened to the incense, and it has nothing to do with me. It's just that the third Miss Xiao insisted that it was because of me yesterday, but I clearly don't know anything," Wang Yusin said innocently. "Miss Wang, this is the Imperial Palace. Not everyone can do whatever they want." The nanny in charge looked at Wang Yusin coldly and said coldly. Wang Yusin lowered her head uneasily and clasped her hands. She was a little flustered, gritted her teeth, and said, "Nanny, I know that this is the Imperial Palace, and I dare not do anything. Besides, I have no grudge against the third Miss Xiao, so why would I want to hurt her? Only the testimony of Xiao Caihuan's maid could not prove anything. Could it be that what Xiao Caihuan's maid said was true? She could just insist that Xiao Caihuan said so in order to shirk the responsibility. Both of them were maids. Who was more noble than the other? The imperial physician sat below the nanny in charge and looked at the half-burned incense sheet in front of him with burning eyes. He did not pay attention to their conversation. The incense sheet in front of him inexplicably reminded him of something, but he couldn't remember it for a while, so he could only frown and continue to think. Miss Wang, do you think that a maid can't prove anything? Seeing that Wang Yusin was still so stubborn, the nanny in charge slammed her hand on the table and said, "In that case, don't blame me." With a wave of her hand, the servant girl behind Miss D took a step forward and knelt in front of the nanny in charge. "Nanny, I also saw Miss Wang's servant girl take action. At that time, I was standing at Miss Wang's side and couldn't see it. However, the servant girl happened to raise her head and look at the people around carefully. I felt surprised and paid more attention to her. I saw her take out a small paper bag from her bosom, put the things in the small paper bag into the incense burner, and then quickly closed it." Nonsense. After being stunned for a moment, Wang Yusin glared at the maid and said. The maid hid to the side timidly and looked at her master, Miss D. "Miss D, why didn't your maid say it yesterday, but now?" Xiao Yenru raised her eyes and looked at Miss D with confusion in her eyes. The nanny in charge also looked a little suspicious and asked, "Miss D, what's going on?" This was what she had asked just now, but she didn't expect that someone had asked the same question last night, but Miss D's maid didn't say anything. "Last night, it was so chaotic. If my maid said anything, it would make more trouble. Besides, the fifth miss was fine at that time." Miss D lowered her head and said in a low voice. As soon as she said this, and looking at Miss D's timid look, everyone immediately understood that Miss D seemed to be a person who didn't want to offend anyone, for fear of offending Wang Yusin. Moreover, Xiao Wanru was just uncomfortable at that time, and it was not a big deal. It was not worth it to offend other misses who entered the palace with her for no reason. "Nanny, can you conclude that it was my maid who did it based on the words of two maids? Nanny, please uphold justice for me." Wang Yusin was still unconvinced. She glared at Miss D angrily, and then turned to the nanny in charge to complain loudly. Miss Yu, who was standing beside her, also seemed to want to speak, but seeing her fierce eyes, she didn't dare to say anything in the end. She just lowered her head and pinched the corner of her clothes. If possible, no one wanted to make enemies with others. If it wasn't Miss Wang, there must be someone else. When I entered the door, I smelled something wrong, but you were there. Now it's my third sister who had an accident, so there must be something wrong with other misses present. If it wasn't Miss Wang, could it be Miss D, Miss Yu, or my big sister? Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at several people present and analyzed. Among the people last night, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru were the least suspicious. The others seemed to be possible before the real culprit was found out. She had been paying attention to Miss Yu's reaction just now. If there was any master who could see it that day, it must be Miss Yu. Her position at that time should also be on the side of Wang Yusin, and Miss Yu seemed to be a meticulous person. However, it was too obvious that she wanted to protect herself. If this matter can't be found out, you can go out of the palace together. The palace will not allow such evil-minded beauties to stay. The nanny in charge understood and threatened with cold eyes. If they couldn't explain it clearly, they would be driven out of the palace together. As soon as she said this, Miss D and Miss Yu's faces turned pale, and their eyes became flustered. Even Xiao Yenru's face darkened. No one wanted to be driven out of the palace at this time, especially because of such a thing. Nanny. I also saw what Miss Wang's maid did last night. Miss Yu couldn't stand still and looked at the nanny in charge in panic. Chapter 751. Miss Yu, did you also see it? The nanny in charge asked again. Yes, I saw it too. Miss Yu said in panic. Xiao Wanru glanced at the two ladies. Both Miss D and Miss Yu seemed to be timid and only wanted to protect themselves. This kind of person would not be willing to offend others if it did not threaten their own interests. Therefore, both Miss Yu and Miss D chose to remain silent yesterday and did not want to offend Wang Yusin easily. In fact, with so many people present, there would inevitably be some flaws. With Wang Yusin's temperament, she could not be so thorough. Since you saw it, why didn't you say it? The nanny in charge scolded sternly. She had asked before, and Miss Yu did not dare to say a word. Now that she heard that she was going to be driven out of the palace, she had to tell the truth. Nanny, this is the palace. I dare not. Miss Yu panicked and burst into tears. She looked at the nanny in charge imploringly, indicating that she was in a helpless situation. Compared with Wang Yusin's status, this nanny in charge was much lower, so she did not dare to offend Wang Yusin. The nanny in charge glared at Miss Yu fiercely, only to see that Miss Yu's face was as pale as snow, and her body was on the verge of collapse. Obviously, she was frightened. Miss Wang, do you have anything to say now? Ignoring Miss Yu, who was frightened, the nanny in charge stared at Wang Yusin coldly and said, Nanny, how can you convict me based on their words? I didn't do it, so I didn't do it. Wang Yusin was also flustered, but she refused to admit it so easily. She gritted her teeth and said, there was no evidence for this kind of thing. She didn't believe that a supervisor nanny could really deal with her. She still had Prince Yu behind her. Prince Yu was quite affectionate to her. As long as she insisted, Prince Yu would definitely save her. What was a nanny in charge? She was just a servant in this palace. Thinking of this, Wang Yusin calmed down again and looked at the nanny in charge with a little arrogance. There were many nannies in charge in her mansion, and they usually looked very strict, but they were not good enough for her. Wang Yusin didn't believe that the nanny in charge could force her to admit it even if she didn't admit it. Wang Yusin thought that the supervisor nannies in the palace were the same as the supervisor nannies in charge of certain affairs in her mansion. Slap yourself. The nanny in charge's eyes fell coldly on Wang Yusin's face. Seeing the indignant and angry expression on her face, she suddenly smiled and said coldly, most of the people who died in the palace were such self-righteous women who really thought that they had some trump cards. If they really had, someone would have taken care of them, just like the first Miss Xiao and the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion. The two of them looked very gentle, but this arrogant fellow thought that he was some great figure and actually dared to oppose him. A palace maid came over and took a step forward to hit her. How dare you? My father is the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. Wang Yusin didn't expect that the nanny in charge would really dare to hit her, so she took a step back and shouted. However, this sentence was not deterrent. The palace maid grabbed her collar mercilessly, and then slapped her hard in the face, almost making Wang Yusin fall out. You, how dare you hit me? Wang Yusin used to be arrogant in the mansion, but now she was hit by a servant. After being stunned for a moment, she was furious and scratched the palace maid's face with her backhand. The palace maid quickly took a step back and avoided Wang Yusin's hand. After giving her a cold look, she retreated behind the nanny in charge and smiled mockingly at Wang Yusin. Like the nanny in charge, those who could survive in the palace were smart. Even if Wang Yusin was selected this time, she would not have a good life. Miss Wang, are you dissatisfied? The nanny in charge looked at Wang Yusin, who was almost threatening, and asked coldly. How dare you? My father is the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. He won't let you bully me like this. Wang Yusin's face was burning with pain, and she was so angry that she almost exploded. Feeling ashamed, she pointed at the nanny in charge and scolded loudly, who do you think you are? You are just a servant. How dare you treat me like this? My father will definitely make you pay with your life. Looking at Wang Yusin, who was almost crazy with anger and talking nonsense, Xiao Yanru no longer had any hope for her and looked away. Originally, she wanted to ask the palace maid who had shown kindness to her to send a message to Wang Yusin, tell her to be careful, and teach her a way to deal with it. Unexpectedly, the palace maid who had secretly sent the message to her didn't come. She had no choice but to come out of the room. She had thought that if Wang Yusin was smart, she would blame it on the servant girl and say that the servant girl was not one of her people. There were many such things in the palace, and it was very likely that someone else's lackey was planted by someone else. It was the same in the palace. It was more likely to happen in the assistant minister's mansion. She could just say that the maid was sent by someone in the assistant minister's mansion to deliberately harm her. However, Wang Yusin was so stupid that she even argued with the nanny in charge. How could the servants in charge of the palace compare with the nanny in charge? Basically, all the servants in charge of the palace had a high rank. Even if Assistant Minister Wang came, what could he do? Moreover, it was obviously Wang Yusin's fault. Although Xiao Wanru watched Wang Yusin's reaction, she had been paying attention to Xiao Yanru. Compared with Xiao Yanru, Wang Yusin was really not worth mentioning. She was just a pawn in the front. But now, this pawn had lost its effect. Of course, even if something happened to this pawn, Xiao Yanru would not be implicated. It would just make Xiao Yanru lose a person who could be used. When Xiao Yanru schemed against her, she understood it in this way. Now, with the change of Xiao Caihuan, it was not so easy for Xiao Yanru to get away unscathed. The third branch had always been suppressed by the second branch, and the miss of the third branch had always been suppressed by Xiao Yanru. Xiao Caihuan did not dare to do anything to Xiao Yanru, but in the current situation, Xiao Caihuan would not care about anything else, put Miss Wang in custody. The nanny in charge didn't want to talk to such a stupid person, so she waved her hand and said, "How dare you? I'm the daughter of the assistant minister's mansion." Wang Yusin was furious. The nanny in charge didn't even bother to look at her. This time, two eunuchs came over, one holding Wang Yusin's hands on the left and the other on the right. The matter had basically been investigated, and the next thing was not something that the nanny in charge could handle. Someone would interrogate Wang Yusin separately. I remember. The imperial physician suddenly patted the table and laughed. He finally remembered what the incense tablets were. Did you find something? The nanny in charge was about to leave, but at this time, she turned to look at the imperial physician and asked with a frown. This incense tablet is not from the Central Plains. It's from the Su state. When the Su state came to pay tribute a few years ago, there was this kind of incense tablet. At that time, they specially showed it to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. The people of the Su state said that this kind of incense tablet could make people have red spots all over their body, which is easy to leave scars. The imperial physician said loudly, extremely excited because he had found this kind of thing. In the inner room, Xiao Caihuan had been listening to the noise outside. At this time, she was so shocked that she almost fainted. How could she not understand that she had been tricked? She held the corner of the quilt tightly and bit the corner of her lips. She would not let Wang Yusin or Xiao Yanru off. Xiao Yanru could not be innocent. Thinking that if her face was ruined, she would really be ruined. What else could she care about? No, shouldn't this be a thread of incense? Why is it an aromatherapy tablet? Could it be that someone has made incense into an aromatherapy tablet, or is it that there is more than one type of incense? After the imperial physician finished speaking, he had a new doubt. His brows furrowed again as he muttered to himself. Imperial physician, may my third sister leave a scar. Xiao Wanru glanced at the imperial physician, who seemed to be lost in thought again and asked. Well, I'm afraid she has to. After being locked in here all night, the smell in the room hasn't dissipated, and there are a lot of red spots. It's difficult for her to recover. The imperial physician didn't want to be interrupted, so he waved his hand and said impatiently. At this time, he was thinking about the incense wholeheartedly. The reason why he remembered it so clearly was that at that time, the Su state had sent several imperial physicians to compete with the imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine, and this kind of mixed poison was involved. At that time, all the imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine were shocked by the mixed poison silently and then disfigured someone. Because of this, They thought that if someone used it to deal with the S in the palace would be in chaos. After that, the threat of incense left by the Sioux state was also sealed up. They didn't expect to see it again after so many years. The imperial physician wasn't there at that time and heard about it later, so he didn't recognize it for a while. He couldn't make the decision on this matter, so he had to report it to the chief physician of the Imperial Institute of Medicine and let him report it to the emperor. Thinking of this, he stood up. Imperial physician, can you ask my third sister why she has this kind of red spots? Why are they all fine? Is it because my third sister stayed in this room at night and the smell in the room lingered for a long time? Then why is her maid fine? Seeing that the imperial physician was about to leave, Xiao Wanru hurriedly said. There is something around her that triggered this kind of incense. It's a mixed poison. I didn't expect that there was this kind of mixed poison in Assistant Minister Wang's mansion. It's really powerful. The imperial physician shook his head. At this point, the matter was basically very clear. It was useless for him to stay. As for what kind of ointment should be used, there was one in the Imperial Institute of Medicine, but it might not be very effective. At that time, it was said that if there were too many red spots, it might leave a scar. But the imperial physician didn't know the details. It was the first time that he had seen this kind of red spots. The dense red spots on the face of the third Miss Xiao in the room made him feel frightened. The third Miss Xiao's face was probably ruined. He asked the little eunuch beside him to fetch the ointment, and the imperial physician left in a hurry. He still had to report this matter, which was not a trivial matter. How could the poison of the Sioux state, which had been locked up, fall into the body of a miss of the assistant minister's mansion? Nanny, I know who wants to hurt me. Nanny, please do me justice. At the door of the inner room, Xiao Caihuan, with a veil on her face, walked out with difficulty with the help of her maid's hand. She knelt down in front of Nanny Guanru with resentment in her eyes, which were exposed outside the veil. Chapter 752. Third sister, I'll get up first. Since Miss Wang did this, Assistant Minister's mansion will definitely give us an explanation. This kind of mixed poison is not something we can know, and Assistant Minister Wang can't get away with it. Seeing Xiao Caihuan like this, Xiao Yenru immediately knew that it was not good. She hurriedly came over to help her and persuaded her in a low voice. She used both soft and hard methods, and even hinted that Xiao Caihuan should not get into trouble. This was a poison from the Sioux state, and not everyone could get it. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart and looked at her indifferently. She saw the anxiety in her eyes, but so what? In the past, Xiao Caihuan would not dare to do anything when she heard her words, but now Xiao Yenru could not scare the half-crazy Xiao Caihuan. Whether it would cause trouble or bring trouble to Duke Xing's mansion was not as important as Xiao Caihuan's hatred for Xiao Yenru at this time. She couldn't wait for Xiao Yenru to die now. Xiao Caihuan had heard clearly what the imperial physician said just now. Her appearance was ruined, and her life was ruined. How could she let Xiao Yenru live a good life? Nanny, it's this protective talisman. Someone must have poisoned this protective talisman. Xiao Caihuan pushed Xiao Yenru away and handed over the protective talisman tightly held in her hand. Seeing this protective talisman and then looking at Xiao Caihuan, who had a crazy aura, Xiao Wanru slowly lowered her head and exhaled heavily. Sure enough, Xiao Caihuan knew that there was something wrong with this protective talisman, so she did not dare to wear it. She only put it under her pillow, thinking that it would be fine in this way, so she did not wear it close to her skin. However, she gave him one of these safety talismans and even said that wearing it would protect him. The protective talisman was usually worn around the neck and close to the skin. However, this protective talisman was more poisonous. Within a certain range of this protective talisman, one would be poisoned. The protective talisman under the pillow was as effective as the one under the pillow. This is it. The nanny in charge did not dare to take this thing directly, so she looked at it and asked. Yes, this is it. It must be caused by this. I had other things before I entered the palace, but this was the only one I got in the palace. At that time, many people handled it. Xiao Caihuan said hatefully. Leave it here. I will investigate this matter thoroughly. The nanny in charge pointed at the corner of the table and signaled her to put it down. She didn't dare to hold it casually, for fear that she would be poisoned. It was better to let someone from the Imperial Academy of Medicine take it away. Who knew what evil things there were in that small country in the wilderness? Nanny, this matter must have something to do with my big sister. Xiao Caihuan put the protective talisman on the table, pointed at Xiao Yenru and said with red eyes. Third sister, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about your protective talisman. How can you say that I have something to do with it? Xiao Yenru was so shocked that her face turned pale. Do you really not know anything about me? That day, when I asked the palace servant to find the amulet, you clearly heard it. Didn't you happen to come over? You even took a few glances at the palace servant. Xiao Caihuan gritted her teeth. I just took a few more glances. What's so strange about that? Third sister's words are unfair. Can't I take a few more glances? Third sister, we are all members of Duke Xing's mansion. The second branch and the third branch of Duke Xing's mansion have always helped each other. Why do you have to push this matter to me now? Xiao Yenru's eyes turned red, and tears fell down. She looked at Xiao Caihuan sadly and said, Third sister, are you dragging me into this? Hearing her reproach and looking at Xiao Caihuan's ferocious face, everyone felt that Xiao Yenru looked more credible. Xiao Caihuan was crazy. She went around biting people, regardless of whether they were her sisters or not. The nanny in charge frowned. She didn't like Xiao Caihuan to accuse others without any evidence. She believed that Xiao Yenru was the one who hurt others just because Xiao Yenru took a few more glances at her. This reason was unreasonable and ridiculous. Could it be that the third Miss Xiao couldn't bear the blow and went crazy because of this matter? The nanny in charge didn't want to involve the first Miss of Xiao's mansion at all. She was a person who was taken care of by the superior. Third Miss, is it strange to look at a palace maid? The nanny in charge asked indifferently. If she were not the legitimate Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, she would have left at this time. It's not strange to look at a palace maid. What's strange is that she also looked for this palace maid and said that she wanted to buy a protective talisman. Xiao Caihuan pointed at Xiao Yenru and said loudly, Why did I look for this palace maid and she also looked for this palace maid? She must have done something. Third Miss Xiao, since you can find someone to buy a protective talisman, why can't the first Miss Xiao do it? The nanny in charge was unhappy. Why did something happen to my protective talisman when she also looked for it? It must be her, it must be her. Xiao Caihuan couldn't give any evidence. She just felt that it was Xiao Yenru. Looking at Xiao Yenru, she was so angry that she wanted to scream. Her life had been ruined, so she wouldn't let Xiao Yenru have an easy time. Well, third Miss Xiao, if you want to go crazy, go back to your mansion and vent it. Do you think that the first Miss Xiao will be jealous of your participation in the beauty contest, so she wants to hurt your face? The nanny in charge raised the corners of her mouth mockingly. This third Miss Xiao was good, but she was still a little worse than the first Miss Xiao. It's not me, it's fifth sister. Big sister wants to hurt you and ruin your face. After choking for a while, Xiao Caihuan turned her eyes to Xiao Wanru crazily, pointed at Xiao Wanru and said loudly. She wants to hurt me. Xiao Wanru saw that they were talking about her, looked up at Xiao Yenru, and then at Xiao Caihuan, and pointed at herself in confusion. Yes, she wants to hurt you. Fifth sister, big sister has always disliked you. She is afraid that you will take her place in the beauty contest, so she just doesn't want you to be left behind. If it were someone else, she wouldn't be afraid, but you are different. You are the legitimate daughter of the first branch and the daughter of the first uncle. The second branch has always been afraid of you and will never let you have an easy time. Xiao Caihuan was almost crazy at this time. She said whatever was on her mind. There was only one crazy idea in her mind. She must drag Xiao Yanru down and make Xiao Yanru suffer. She would never let Xiao Yanru have an easy time. Slap! A heavy slap landed on Xiao Caihuan's face, and Xiao Caihuan's head tilted to one side. Xiao Yanru knelt down beside Xiao Caihuan with a plop, holding Xiao Caihuan's hand tightly with both hands, and tears fell down. Third sister, wake up. We are sisters in the same mansion. No matter you or fifth sister, if anything happens to either of us, Grandma will feel bad. Grandma values rules the most. How can she let us sisters do this? You are making Grandma sad. You are like digging out Grandma's heart. Third sister, you were hurt today. I know it's my fault. I didn't take good care of you. If you are angry, it doesn't matter if you hit me a few more times. When I go back, I will definitely ask Grandma to find a way to cure you. The imperial physician also said that you may only leave a scar. With the strength of our entire Duke Xing's mansion, it may not be useless to find a good doctor. But if something happens to our Duke Xing's mansion because of us sisters, how can we have time to find a good doctor for you? Xiao Yanru cried bitterly. She let go of Xiao Caihuan's hand, hugged Xiao Caihuan, and held her in her arms. Third sister, we are a family. We are bound together for good or ill. The mixed poison of the Su state is not something that ordinary people can get. If we find out who got this mixed poison, their property will be confiscated and their whole family will be exterminated. If their property was confiscated and their whole family exterminated, no one would be able to survive. Xiao Caihuan shuddered. Her originally frantic eyes were comforted by Xiao Yanru's words. Hearing the meaning of Xiao Yanru's words, she trembled suddenly and her eyes became panicked. She had acted in a spurt of anger before, but now she panicked because of Xiao Yanru's words. If something happened to Duke Xing's mansion, her face would really be ruined. No one would treat her again, and she might even lose her life. There was not only the second branch of Duke Xing's mansion, but also the third branch. Before they separated, the third branch was one. Xiao Wanru calmly watched Xiao Yanru intimidate Xiao Caihuan and raised the corners of her mouth silently. She was now also a member of Duke Xing's mansion. From this point of view, of course, she would not let Duke Xing's mansion get involved in this matter, nor did she ask to push Xiao Yanru out for such a thing. With Xiao Yanru's temperament, how could she fall into the trap so easily? There was no direct evidence to prove that it was her, but because of Xiao Caihuan's crazy behavior just now, people had already suspected her. This was enough. 1,000-mile ant's nest was destroyed in an instant. Xiao Yanru had an excellent reputation outside, but now her reputation was really damaged. She had attracted the attention of others before she was officially selected, so Xiao Yanru would become a target for many people. There was always someone better than her. Xiao Wanru glanced at the nanny in charge's face and saw her looking at Xiao Yanru thoughtfully. There was no change in her expression, but her eyes were very deep. Everyone in the palace was shrewd. Xiao Yanru's words sounded like she was persuading Xiao Caihuan, but in fact, there was another meaning in her words. The first Miss Xiao was not as dignified and gentle as the rumors said. She was obviously a scheming person. Thinking of Xiao Caihuan's words before, she turned to Xiao Wanru, who was standing aside. Xiao Wanru, who was standing quietly on the side, frowned slightly. It seemed that she was at a loss in the current situation, so she did not go up to persuade Xiao Yanru immediately. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times, showing a smart and beautiful coldness, and the raised corners of her eyes and red corners of her mouth made people feel charming. There were many beauties in the world. Some were arrogant, some were charming, and some were as beautiful as orchids in autumn. Only the fifth Miss Xiao was completely different from others. There was a hint of coldness in her charm, which made people unconsciously think of the aloof fairies in the Moon Palace. But when she smiled slightly, it was like hundreds of flowers blooming, diluting that coldness and charm. Such a face could be said to be stunning, or not only stunning, but also beautiful. It was understandable that the first Miss Xiao, who was known as the First Beauty, wanted to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao. Moreover, the first Miss Xiao was not as kind as the rumors said outside. Chapter 753. Xiao Caihuan was sent out of the imperial palace after lunch. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yanru followed her all the way to the gate of the imperial palace and watched her leave slowly with the help of 2 palace maids, followed by an imperial physician. In such a situation, she naturally couldn't participate in the talent show anymore. Not to mention the talent show, it was not easy to cure her face. Fifth sister, let's go back. Seeing Xiao Caihuan's figure disappear behind the palace gate, Xiao Yanru turned around and said to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru's face. Xiao Yanru looked a little tired, and it was difficult to hide a trace of haggardness in her eyes. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and was about to speak when they suddenly heard crying behind them. They looked back together and saw 3 people coming from the opposite side. The first one was Wang Yusin, but the arrogant and rude miss of the assistant minister, at this time, covered her face and cried as she walked. The people following behind her were not her maids, but 2 eunuchs. One look and anyone could tell that they were very impatient. Xiao Wanru's eyes darkened. This morning, the imperial palace sent a chief eunuch and a chief palace maid over to deal with their affairs. She was called over once, and Xiao Yanru was called over several times. At the moment, Xiao Yanru looked haggard, half of which was pretending, and the other half was real. Although Xiao Yanru was not involved in this matter, because of Xiao Caihuan's previous crazy actions and the testimony of the palace maid, even if Xiao Duanru could not be accused of plotting against her, she must have done something. However, no one could find anything on her for the time being, so no one thought that she was innocent. When the chief eunuch and the chief palace maid left, they were extremely cold to Xiao Yanru, which was completely different from when they had just come. Xiao Yanru should have panicked, so they could see the haggard look on her face. Otherwise, with Xiao Yanru's temperament, even if she was really tired, she would not let others see it at a glance. In the end, it fell on Wang Yusin. Her maid was directly detained and probably tortured. She was the daughter of the vice minister's mansion, so they couldn't do anything to her before things were completely clear, so they drove her out of the palace first. Since she had used the word drive, of course, she couldn't say it in a good tone. The 2 eunuchs obviously didn't treat her well. Seeing that she walked slowly, one of them even pushed her. Wang Yusin was pushed so hard that she almost fell. After 2 steps, she stood still and saw Xiao Yanru and her sister standing in front of her. She turned her eyes from Xiao Yanru's face to Xiao Wanru's with hatred on her face, but she did not dare to be as presumptuous as before. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Wang Yusin calmly. Now the matter had basically been investigated. Wang Yusin accidentally picked up such a piece of incense. It turned out that she had heard that Xiao Wanru had been drugged. If she smoked with this incense, there would inevitably be red blisters on her face, and then she would not be able to participate in the consort selection. Therefore, Wang Yusin secretly took this piece of incense to deal with Xiao Wanru, which led to a series of things later. Originally, she was going to Xiao Wanru's room, but she expected that Xiao Wanru had not come back yet, so she went to Xiao Caihuan's room, put incense in Xiao Caihuan's incense burner, and then asked Xiao Caihuan to invite Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, it was Xiao Caihuan who was drugged in the end instead of Xiao Wanru. As for Xiao Caihuan's protective talisman, she asked a palace maid to help her buy it at a high price. It was not so easy to find protective talismans in the palace, especially those that had been consecrated. In order to get a high price, the palace maid actually took out protective talismans that had not been consecrated. Even the nuns in the hall said that they did not know about it. They would make some protective talismans, which were recorded in the records of those that had been consecrated. As for those that had not been consecrated, they would sometimes be given one when the chief palace maids came to ask for it. Because it was not for noble lords, it was just an ordinary kind, so no one would care who it was given to. Therefore, the protective talisman that Xiao Caihuan got was not found. There were two aspects that implicated Xiao Yanru. One was what Xiao Caihuan said and the palace maid's testimony. Xiao Yanru did send someone to contact her and asked her about the protective talisman. She also asked her to buy one, and it was sent to Xiao Yanru first, and then to Xiao Caihuan. The other was the testimony of a palace maid. She said that she saw Xiao Yanru and her maid talking about something after the palace maid left. For fear that others would hear it, the maid deliberately stood at the door, looked around, and then closed the door. The palace maid saw their sneaky behavior through the window. But she didn't know what they were talking about. She only remembered that the maid pointed in the direction of 5th Miss Xiao at that time, and then there was nothing else. Because of the evidence of these two people and some unclear reasons, the chief eunuchs and the chief palace maid sent here all thought that Xiao Yanru was not innocent. Although the palace maid who gave Xiao Yanru the protective talisman swore that she took 3 protective talismans at the same time, it was impossible for 2 of them to be in trouble while the other one was fine. The final result of the investigation was that the protective talisman in Xiao Yanru's hand was fine. Xiao Caihuan and the one Xiao Caihuan gave Xiao Wanru were mixed with something else. Xiao Wanru also made it clear that she didn't like the protective talisman. If she didn't accept it, she was afraid that Xiao Caihuan would be unhappy, so she accepted it and put it by the window. The maid accidentally thought that she didn't want it, so she threw it out of the window. In the end, the protective talisman was found outside the window. It could be said that it was a freak accident that Xiao Wanru avoided this disaster. If Xiao Wanru also wore it, even if it was not as serious as Xiao Caihuan's, she would inevitably have red spots and be sent out of the palace. Miss Wang. Seeing Wang Yusen standing in front of them and not leaving, Xiao Wanru raised her eyes lightly, looked at her, and said, "Miss Wang, I have no grudge against you in the past or today, but why do you want to harm me like this? Don't tell me that Miss Wang will benefit from my face." Since they met, Xiao Wanru happened to have something to ask. Wang Yusen's hatred for her was so great that it seemed that she was determined to destroy her. There was no relationship between them. Even if there was some unhappiness, it was only once, and they had never met each other for the rest of the time. Do you need others to tell you what you have said and done? Xiao Wanru, don't be too proud. God is watching you. Wang Yusen gnashed her teeth and said, looking at Xiao Wanru with resentment. Her words were inexplicable, as if she wanted to harm Xiao Wanru, and Xiao Wanru deserved it. Yujie was so angry that she was about to step forward, but Xiao Wanru stopped her with a look. Miss Wang, do you really think it's okay? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and glanced at the high palace wall on the side. In their section, there were high palace walls on both sides, and people standing inside were almost small. The thick palace walls gave people a deep depression, especially for people like Wang Yusen, who had been driven out of the palace. Wang Yusen's face changed dramatically, and she clenched her trembling fingers. Third sister was poisoned by the Su state, and I heard that it was an offering at that time. This kind of thing is not something that Miss Wang can get. Miss Wang, I'm afraid that even Vice Minister Wang can't absolve himself from the guilt. Xiao Wanru withdrew her gaze and looked at Wang Yusen extremely calmly with some pity in her eyes. Miss Wang, do you really not know that you have been used by others? After that, she stopped looking at her and walked past Wang Yusen with a contemptuous look. After Xiao Wanru walked over, it was Xiao Yanru who faced Wang Yusen. Miss Wang, don't worry. How can this kind of thing involve your father? Fifth sister is just trying to scare you. Xiao Yanru comforted her softly. Compared with Xiao Wanru's attitude, Xiao Yanru's attitude was almost gentle, with some pity for Wang Yusen, which made people have a good impression on her. In this way, the first Miss Xiao was indeed the kindest. The two little eunuchs didn't know what had happened before, and they thought that the first Miss Xiao seemed to have a good character. Being comforted, Wang Yusen's lips trembled twice. It seemed that she wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say at the moment, and tears fell down again. Big sister, do you think that Miss Wang is wronged? I remember that the Imperial Palace has just concluded that third sister's face has been ruined, and so has her life. But I didn't expect that big sister still thinks that Miss Wang is wronged. In that case, third sister is really at a disadvantage. You've only been in the imperial palace for a few days, but your friendship with Miss Wang has surpassed the sisterhood of many years. Xiao Wanru turned around behind them, and her cold eyes fell on Xiao Yenru through Wang Yusen. Their eyes met through Wang Yusen. The smile on Xiao Yenru's face froze. Wang Yusen had just framed Xiao Caihuan, and it was verified. She didn't help her sister, but showed kindness to Wang Yusen, which sounded like she was trying to cover up. Xiao Wanru clenched the handkerchief in her hand and became more and more cunning. Although they were at the gate of the imperial palace, and it seemed that no one paid attention to them, the two little eunuchs beside them would pass the message. Xiao Yenru was sure that what she said here today would definitely be spread out. She had just wanted to comfort Wang Yusen, but at this time, she couldn't go on. Xiao Wanru, what do you mean? Wang Yusen turned her head angrily, and her eyes almost spurted fire. I just want to make it clear that our Duke Xing's mansion is no longer friendly with your Wang's mansion. But if Miss Wang and Big Sister have a good relationship, then I have nothing to say. After all, I don't represent the whole Duke Xing's mansion, but only myself. No matter if you want to frame me or third sister, and I will no longer be friendly with you. Vicious people will eventually suffer from their own actions. But I don't know who will benefit the most in the end. Xiao Wanru's words were extremely cold and merciless. After that, she turned to look at Xiao Yenru with a faint, almost traceless smile on her lips, which looked a little gloomy and evil in the two high walls. Big sister, if you really have such a good relationship with Miss Wang, you can see Miss Wang off. I'll go back first. By the way, please ask who flattered Miss Wang and thought that I wanted to hurt her. Miss Wang is like. Do I have to care about her and hurt her? Chapter 754. After saying that, Xiao Wanru looked Wang Yusen up and down contemptuously, and then walked to the palace in an extremely arrogant manner. Fifth sister, wait for me. Of course, Xiao Yenru couldn't stay at this time. Xiao Caihuan had been in such a big trouble, and it was all because of Wang Yusen. Wang Yusen's face turned blue with anger at first, and then turned red with anger. When Xiao Yenru passed by her, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and she looked at Xiao Yenru's back in horror. Originally, she didn't think that Xiao Yenru had anything to do with it, but Xiao Wanru's words just now enlightened her. Those words that Xiao Wanru said about her in private were indeed heard from others, but the one who said it was a good friend of hers, so she didn't suspect her at first. However, Xiao Wanru's words just now woke her up like the evening drum and morning bell. She felt weak and leaned against the palace wall on the side, feeling dizzy and cold. Among the palace maids in the draft, Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yenru were the most outstanding, not only because of their appearance, but also because of their family backgrounds. If there were any rivals, the Xiao sisters were the real rivals. If something happened to Xiao Wanru, the one who benefited the most would naturally be Xiao Yenru. Coincidentally, every time Xiao Yenru mentioned that the fifth Miss Xiao had slandered her behind her back, the first Miss Xiao was present, and she had always been very protective of her fifth sister. It seemed that they had a good relationship, but just now, she clearly felt that the relationship between the Xiao sisters was not good at all. Thinking of some rumors outside and what she saw in front of her, Wang Yusen blacked out. She finally realized that she seemed to have been used by someone. Every time Xiao Yenru helped Xiao Wanru explain, she would get angrier and more upset. If the relationship between the Xiao sisters wasn't so good, and the first Miss Xiao wasn't so generous, she wouldn't have seen it. Could it really be the first Miss Xiao? Wang Yusen reached out to grab Xiao Yenru and asked her to make it clear, but she found that she couldn't say a word. She had no evidence to prove that the first Miss Xiao had intervened in this matter. Her fingers were trembling, and her whole body was trembling. Wang Yusen finally knew fear. If this was really Xiao Yenru's scheme, she must have done it when she first saw her. She didn't expect that she had fallen into such a trap so early. At this time, she couldn't explain it even if she wanted to. No wonder when the first Miss Xiao invited her over to talk, she was not in her room but in Xiao Caihuan's room. No wonder she always heard her good sisters say that Xiao Wanru cursed her viciously in private, even though she had no grudge against Xiao Wanru. Who would be in a good mood? If there was such an opportunity, he would definitely not let it go. First Miss Xiao. Her voice almost overflowed from her throat. Wang Yusin thought it was loud, but in fact, it was very light. Seeing the Xiao sisters disappear in front of her, Wang Yusin fell to the ground with a pale face. Xiao Wanru's words hit her ears hard. She didn't care about it before, but now she cared about it very much. The meaning in her words was very clear. There was only one meaning. Her matter was not over. Not only her, but also her father would be implicated. Because of the thing from the Su kingdom, Xiao Caihuan was poisoned by the Su kingdom, and not everyone could get access to the offering. A little eunuch stepped forward, looked at her condescendingly, and said sarcastically, "Miss Wang, don't you want to go?" If it had been a few days ago, he wouldn't have dared to say it. But now Wang Yusin was useless, so he could say whatever he wanted. She didn't seem to be a smart person. How dare she talk to the two misses of Duke Xing's mansion like this? Didn't she know that they were likely to be selected in the future? But on second thought, if she was smart, such a thing wouldn't have happened. Now she was just sent back to the imperial palace, and it was uncertain what would happen after she went back. But one thing was certain. She was ruined, and even her father, an assistant minister, couldn't save her. The people in the imperial palace had always been the best at currying favor with those in power. At this time, they just hit her when she was down. The other eunuch saw that she had fallen to the ground and her eyes were unfocused. He walked over and pulled her up. He said impatiently, "It's useless even if you pretend to be crazy now. Hurry up and leave so that we can finish our task earlier. It's really unlucky for you to be like this." After pulling her up, he pushed her forward hard. This time, Wang Yusin didn't stand firm and fell heavily to the ground again. Her knees hit the big blue stone under her feet, making a heavy sound. The sharp pain woke her up. She slowly stood up with her hands on the ground and looked at the imperial palace with dying eyes. Then she turned around with difficulty, staggered, gritted her teeth, and walked away. She couldn't let it go like this. She wanted to go back and tell her father that this was an internal matter of Duke Xing's mansion and had nothing to do with her. She was also set up. This matter stirred up a lot of waves in the palace. For a while, Chuxiu Palace sent more palace servants over and paid more attention to the affairs of the beauties. The originally relaxed environment immediately became tense because of this matter. The beauties looked at their companions around them and felt worried. They vaguely felt that some of their companions might set them up. For a moment, the entire Chuxiu Palace was in a state of panic. Even if they had a good relationship with each other in the past, it was better not to walk together at this time in order to avoid arousing suspicion. Only sisters from the same mansion occasionally walked together or had a good relationship with each other. What happened outside the imperial palace couldn't be spread to Chuxiu Palace for the time being. Xiao Wanru didn't know what would happen to Wang Yusin after she went back. But as long as Wang Yusin wasn't really stupid, she should understand that she had been set up by someone and became a sharp weapon in someone else's hands. As for who the person who used her was, it depended on who would benefit the most if something happened to her. Although Xiao Yanru didn't directly take action, she definitely played a role in it. As long as Wang Yusin could guess Xiao Yanru's identity, she could find other traces of Xiao Yanru's activities and would inevitably find some evidence in her favor. Of course, she couldn't predict whether these plausible evidence could save her. She just had to see how the assistant minister's mansion would deal with it. In any case, this matter had nothing to do with her now. It was Xiao Yanru who was concerned. Xiao Yanru seemed to win this round. There was no evidence pointing directly at her, but in fact, it made more people doubt her intentions. A beauty with outstanding appearance, a noble family background, and an extremely scheming beauty would be a taboo to everyone, especially those who participated in the beauty contest with her. No one knew when they would be set up. No one knew where the rumor came from. Originally, this matter had been tightly sealed. It was only known that Miss Wang of the assistant minister's mansion had set up the third miss of Duke Xing's mansion, but no one knew the details. However, some beauties eavesdropped on the private conversation of the palace maids and talked about the tortuous cause of this matter. Many people in the imperial palace were smart. They knew that the third Miss Xiao had been set up by mistake. When they were supposed to deal with the fifth Miss Xiao, many people guessed that it was the first Miss Xiao. Seeing that the reputation of the first beauty was about to be taken away by her cousin, everyone could imagine what the first Miss Xiao would do out of unwillingness. But after all, it was a little too vicious. There used to be some rumors about Duke Xing's mansion, Madam of Duke Xing, and Xiao Yanru in the capital city. Everyone thought it was unlikely before. After all, the first Miss Xiao's image was so good that some hearsay couldn't be accurate. But now everyone thought it was very possible. When some things were connected and they saw it with their own eyes, it was easy to correct their original thoughts. This was the situation now for the beauties. They stayed away from ghosts and gods, and they never wanted to follow in the footsteps of the third Miss Xiao, who was the first Miss Xiao's cousin. They were sisters from the same mansion and they had been friends for so many years. Even they could do it, let alone others. Some of the beauties who had been on good terms with Xiao Yanru had to measure their friendship with Xiao Yanru at this time. Could it compare with the sisterhood between Xiao Yanru and Xiao Caihuan? They had long heard that Xiao Yanru, the eldest daughter of lineal descent, took great care of other sisters-in-law in the mansion. Was this how she took care of them? The beauties were suspicious and avoided the two sisters of Duke Xing's mansion one by one. None of them was willing to be with them. One might be harmed, which was not a good thing, while the other took the initiative to harm others. They might be used at any time. Xiao Yanru found a strange phenomenon that there were fewer and fewer people around her. There were many young ladies who were willing to talk to her, but now there was no one around her. Wherever she went, others looked at her with vigilance. Sometimes, when she walked past the beauties who were talking, the others just left. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. After several times, Xiao Yanru found that these things were not a coincidence. After asking Shuqi to inquire about it, she was so angry that her fingers trembled. But she didn't know where the rumor came from, nor did she know which palace maid said it. Even if she went to explain it, she couldn't explain it clearly. Xiao Yanru had to suffer it in silence. After calming down for a while, she also cast her eyes on Xiao Wanru. She felt that she and Xiao Wanru were born to be enemies. If Xiao Wanru existed, there would be no Xiao Wanru. This matter must have something to do with Xiao Wanru. Maybe it was because of what she said to Wang Yusin at the gate of the palace that day. At that time, she had wanted to explain to Wang Yusin and comfort her. But with Xiao Wanru's words, what else could she say? She could only follow Xiao Wanru back. Now thinking of it, it should be Xiao Wanru who did it on purpose. Thinking of this hatred, she put the teacup in her hand heavily on the table. Xiao Wanru, she would never let this bitch off. She took a deep breath to calm down the anger in her heart. Then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes again, her eyes had calmed down. She couldn't sit still and wait for death. She couldn't be isolated and suspected by everyone, and then let other nobles in the palace suspect her so as to affect her consort selection. She had to save herself. Chapter 755. Xiao Wanru lived a peaceful life in the past few days. She didn't know many people, so it didn't matter if those misses didn't get close to her. Moreover, she was the victim, not the culprit. Those misses still looked at her kindly. Although they thought that she was too beautiful and a strong opponent, compared with Xiao Yanru, Xiao Wanru was much less dangerous. Xiao Wanru became more and more familiar with this female painter, and even the female painter asked her to come over and talk to her when she was free. The female painter's surname was Chu, Madame Chu. She was the madam of an official's family. Her rank was not high, and her husband died without a son, so she was recommended to the imperial palace to paint for the beauties. When Madame Chu was young, she was a famous talented woman in the capital city, but her family background was a little shallow, so she only married a low-ranking official. Her husband died without a son. This situation was very similar to Xiao Wanru's imagination in her last life. It inexplicably reminded her of the time when she entered the imperial palace to paint for the beauties after Wen Shiqi's death. The difference was that she had a bad reputation in the capital city. Someone must have ordered her to enter the imperial palace to paint. Although she still couldn't remember Chu Luchen, she could always feel that Chu Luchen seemed to be everywhere after she entered the imperial palace. Therefore, she could hardly remember what happened after she entered the imperial palace, or she could only remember bits and pieces. Only when Chu Luchen wasn't in the picture could she see and remember clearly. Xiao Wanru didn't know the reason. Since she had been reborn, she didn't understand why she had dug out the memory about Chu Luchen from her memory. But it didn't prevent her from understanding that she should enter the imperial palace to help Chu Luchen, and Qi Baiyu didn't have such great power. Madame Chu in front of her proved her idea very well. There were many female painters in the imperial palace, and each of them was talented. Madame Chu could enter the imperial palace after passing several tests. At that time, it seemed that she immediately entered the imperial palace as soon as Qi Baiyu went to tell her about it without any difficulty. In her previous life, she was so muddle-headed that she could hardly think or see anything. Therefore, she did not think about the weirdness in this life. Now she thought about it, it was really a joke. How could she think that Qi Baiyu was capable enough to take care of her in the palace? In this life and the previous life, Chu Luchen had been by her side all the time, but she didn't see him. Thinking of this, Xiao Wanru was full of guilt. There was such a person who had been by her side to help her, but she had dug out the memory about him deeply. If he knew, he would be heartbroken. At this time, she suddenly felt lucky that she was the one who had been reborn, not Chu Luchen. The beauties were not close to her, they were all afraid that she would be harmed again. If they got too close to her, they might be caught in the crossfire. She was free, so that day she went to Madame O's place again. Sometimes, Madame O didn't paint a portrait and would only retouch the image that she had painted before. It would take a lot of time to slowly retouch it. Madame O's painting is really good. Xiao Wanru turned behind Madame O, looked at the painting that she was revising, and said with a smile. She really appreciated Madame O's painting skills. In her previous life, she had painted many beauties. Now seeing Madame O's painting, she couldn't help but want to say something. It's not very good. I always feel that something is missing. Madame O put down the painting in her hand, took a step back, looked at her painting, and then looked at Xiao Wanru. She always felt that something was missing in her painting. The fifth Miss Xiao in front of her was obviously better than her painting. She was revising Xiao Wanru's painting now. In fact, she had already painted one before, but Madame O was not satisfied with it, so she drew another one. But she was still not satisfied with this one. It's very good. Madame O is going to paint me as if I'm the best in the world. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and a leisurely look. She liked the peaceful feeling in the studio and would come to see Madame O from time to time. The fifth miss has always been outstanding. In fact, it has little to do with me. It's just that I can't paint the fifth miss's charm. Madame O shook her head helplessly and felt that her painting skills were not good enough. Otherwise, how could she fail to paint the person in front of her? She said while looking at the painting, I heard that the third young master of the left prime minister is excellent in painting. If I can get his painting, I will definitely be able to paint the fifth miss's real charm. Madame O said with great pity. Of course, she didn't really want Wen Shiqi to paint for Xiao Wanru. She just said that. Xiao Wanru's hand holding the painting album paused for a moment, and then she slowly put down the painting album in her hand. When she met Wen Shiqi in her previous life, the famous elegant child in the capital city had been tortured by illness and mainly recuperated in bed. Even so, he still gave her some advice. However, she made real progress in the imperial palace. It should be Chu Luchen who taught her, but she didn't know whether he taught her in person or sent her a painting. She reached out her hand and rubbed between her eyebrows, feeling too uncomfortable as if there was something pressing in her mind. She knew it should be like this, but she couldn't see it. "Fifth Miss, are you tired?" Seeing Xiao Wanru rubbing her eyebrows, Madame O asked with concern. "I'm fine. I just have a headache." Xiao Wanru covered it up and said, "Fifth Miss, go inside and have a rest," Madame O said with concern. She had no children, but she got along well with Xiao Wanru these days. She had long regarded Xiao Wanru as her nephew. "Thank you, Madame O." Xiao Wanru nodded, picked up the painting album she put down casually, turned around, and walked behind the screen. This studio was divided into two parts. The front room was for painting, and the back room was for resting. There was a large rattan chair near the back window with two thick cushions on it. After Xiao Wanru came over and sat down, she leaned against it. Yujia put the cushions behind her so that she could lean against the rattan chair. The rattan chair was very spacious. Xiao Wanru was petite, so she nestled in the rattan chair. With the sunlight coming in from the window, she looked extremely comfortable. Yujia served a cup of tea on the table in front of her and then left, leaving Xiao Wanru to rest alone in the room. After flipping through a few pages, her eyelids became heavier and heavier, and she finally fell into a deep sleep. Xiao Wanru had been dreaming, and the boundless dream seemed to have been in the thick darkness. She had been despised by everyone in Jiangzhou before she entered the capital city. Qi Tianyu had pulled off the red veil when the bridal sedan chair had arrived. All the disasters had started at that time. From that time on, she became a shameless girl who snatched her elder sister's marriage by force. Then there were rumors about her relationship with Qi Baiyu, which further branded her as a bitch. Then, on her way to the capital city, she was schemed against one marriage after another, and the engagement was broken off again and again. Finally, she entered the deputy prime minister's mansion in the name of Chong Shi, and then she ended up being driven out of the mansion. She was trampled into the mud again and again, and in the end, her life was full of blood. She had been schemed against all her life and then fell into a dead end. Her heart ached so much that she couldn't breathe, as if something was suppressing her. She wanted to say something to scare the nightmare away, but she couldn't say a word. Zhuozhua, zhuozhua. Suddenly, someone called her. The bloody dream slowly faded, and then there was thick darkness. There seemed to be a figure in the darkness, but she couldn't see it clearly. She only knew that it was a man with a high hat on his head, but she couldn't see who he was. She could only see a pair of beautiful and gloomy eyes. She suddenly opened her eyes and stared at the pair of eyes in front of her. She subconsciously touched the pair of eyes with trembling fingers and asked, Who are you? Did you have a nightmare?" Chu Luchen reached out to hold her slender hand and only felt that it was cold under his fingers. She must have been frightened, so his voice softened. Xiao Wanru blinked. After a long while, she saw clearly that it was Chu Luchen in front of her. Looking at his gentle eyes, he was completely different from the gloomy eyes in the dream just now. Sure enough, the dream was a dream, and it was fake. For a moment, her tight heartstrings suddenly broke. She reached out to hold Chu Luchen and burst into tears. Chu Luchen was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would suddenly lose control and burst into tears. Thinking of what had happened recently, he raised his eyebrows and asked while reaching out to hold Xiao Wanru's thin body, "Did Xiao Yanru bully you?" There was a bit of bloodthirsty coldness in his handsome eyes. He didn't mind directly reaching out to deal with Xiao Yanru, even if there was someone behind Duke Xing's mansion. No. Xiao Wanru said while crying and even choked. Chu Luchen reached out to pat her back gently and said, "Who else could it be if not her?" I had a nightmare," Xiao Wanru said vaguely. Even though she choked with sobs, she could still sense Chu Luchen's anger. She didn't want Chu Luchen to intervene in this kind of thing. Well, don't be afraid. It's okay. What kind of nightmare could make you cry like this? Hearing that it was because of a nightmare, Chu Luchen smiled, reached out to pat Xiao Wanru on the back, and comforted her. His eyes fell on her little face with a trace of childishness. As expected, she was still a child. How could she be so frightened by a nightmare? His hands fell on Xiao Wanru's back and became softer. It was very quiet in the room, except for Xiao Wanru's crying and Chu Liuchen's gentle coaxing from time to time. Yujie looked at Xiao Xuanzi, who was standing beside her, and walked to the side in disgust. She didn't want to stand with him. Originally, she wanted to go in to serve the miss, but she was stopped by Xiao Xuanzi. Looking at a weak person who was stronger than her, Yujie was really in a bad mood. Seeing Yujie avoid him, Xiao Xuanzi came up to her again and said with a smile, "Why are you in such a hurry? Our master is here. Fifth miss will stop crying in a while." He said it so naturally, as if his master was good at coaxing people. Yujie snorted softly. Was Prince Chen the kind of person who was good at coaxing people? No matter how she looked at it, it was possible for him to make her miss cry. Originally, her miss was quiet, but why did she cry as soon as Prince Chen went in? However, Yujie was not in a hurry. Her trusted subordinates were very clear about the relationship between her miss and Prince Chen. Chapter 756. It became quiet in the room, and only Xiao Wanru's occasional sobs could be heard. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and blushed. After the confusion just now, she found how ambiguous their posture was. Chu Luchen sat in the rattan chair and held her, who was crying. She didn't feel anything when she cried excitedly just now. Now that she was sober, she didn't know how to face others. She buried her head tightly. In fact, she couldn't cry anymore. Now she was thinking about how to get out of this embarrassing situation. What's wrong? Don't cry anymore. Chu Luchen looked down at Xiao Wanru in his arms, who almost buried her whole face in his arms. He was in a good mood. He raised the corners of his thin lips with an elegant and gentle smile and reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's hair. His touch made her heart beat rapidly, as if it was about to jump out of her chest. She curled her fair and tender fingers and slowly let go of Chu Liuchen's sleeves. She bit her lip uncomfortably and wanted to move away from Chu Liuchen's arms. Unexpectedly, the hand on her waist became heavier and pressed her body into his arms again. "Do you want to cry for a while more?" he asked. His teasing voice came lazily, which made Xiao Wanru, who was so shy that she didn't know how to deal with it, a little angry. She pushed him hard, raised her face, and tried to pretend to be indifferent and serious. "Your Highness, put me down." Her little face was tight, and her long eyelashes fluttered a few times like butterfly wings. She was obviously very nervous and shy, but she looked like she was making threatening gestures. Chu Luchen couldn't help but laugh. He stretched out his other hand and gently pinched her pink little face. Her face was as smooth as a fine jade. Then he saw the jade turn red little by little. He couldn't help chuckling and reached out his hand to pinch her little face again. Xiao Wanru reached out to push his hand away, and then pushed him away. She almost fell off Chu Luchen because of the rebound. Fortunately, Chu Luchen reached out to help her stand in front of the chair. "Sit down." Knowing that Xiao Wanru was so shy that she was about to smoke, Chu Luchen smiled and pointed to another rattan chair in front of him, narrowed his eyes and said. This rattan chair was not as big as the one before, but Xiao Wanru could sit on it. Seeing that he didn't mention what had happened just now, Xiao Wanru sat on the rattan chair with a red face and put a strand of her beautiful hair to her ear. She looked a little messy and impolite, but Chu Luchen felt that she looked more and more pleasing to the eye. He looked her up and down. Xiao Wanru, who only looked at him, blushed and rushed up again. His whole body was burning hot, as if he was about to burn up. "Your side is too hot. Actually, you can sit here with me. This chair is big, and we can sit together." Chu Luchen patted the chair he was sitting on and said with a faint smile. Xiao Wanru glared at him fiercely. This person was so bad. He clearly knew the reason, but still said such words. I'm not hot, she said angrily in shame and hatred. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly, refusing to look at the face that was so handsome that it was almost evil. This person did it on purpose. Chu Luchen moved and looked sideways at Xiao Wanru's blushing face. He stood up and reached out to pull the wide rattan chair to Xiao Wanru. He pulled away the table, which was originally placed in the middle, and said impatiently, "You're really in the way." Xiao Wanru was almost stunned to see him push the table away, pull the rattan chair over, and then sit beside her as if it was a matter of course. How could he still be so natural? She also felt that the table was too much of a hindrance. What was it? Everyone's table was placed between two chairs. While feeling ashamed and angry, she inexplicably felt a trace of warmth in her heart, which diluted the dull feeling of suffocation in the nightmare just now. At this moment, at least she was real, not in a dream, and not the miserable self in the dream. Now she was real, and the last life had passed. There was sunlight slanting in through the window. The sunshine in winter was the warmest, and at this moment, it warmed her heart. She moved slightly and leaned to the side. It was such a wide chair, but Chu Luchen leaned to her side, which was really embarrassing. Don't move. It's good to lean like this. Chu Luchen pulled Xiao Wanru's sleeve and brought her body, which had been leaning to the other side, to his side. Then he put one hand around her shoulder and said, "After the consort selection, I can come to see you openly." Xiao Wanru looked at him with a red face and was speechless. He also knew that he could not come to see her openly. Imperial grandmother has already known about it. You can live with others in the palace. If the first miss of your mansion wants to take action, let me do it. Chu Liuchen's eyebrows and eyes became sharp, and a trace of darkness flashed across the bottom of his eyes. Knowing that he was worried about her, Xiao Wanru lowered her head, turned over the handkerchief in her hand, shook her head, and said, "Don't do anything to Xiao Yenru. Duke Xing's mansion is not simple, so is she. It's very bad to intervene rashly. I can deal with her." After being reborn, she had seized the first opportunity and was no longer blinded by the so-called family affection. Xiao Yenru was no longer the high and mighty Xiao Jiaoyi, and she was no longer the lonely female painter. Even if she entered the palace, she could only be tortured by Xiao Yenru and even died in her hands in the end. At this moment, she and Xiao Yenru were standing on the same level. Neither of them was much higher than the other, and they were almost equal. Even because of her maternal grandmother, she looked more noble on the surface and more justifiable from her father's side. Then be careful. If you can't deal with her, tell me. No matter who she is, I won't spare her. Chu Luchen nodded and said in a clear voice with a bit of coldness, which was not like his genial appearance in front of others. But this was the real him. Chu Luchen, who was born in this situation, could not really be a harmless and handsome young man who walked out of a painting. I will be careful. Xiao Wanru nodded and said after hesitating for a moment, I heard that this matter involves pie again. It's said that the powder that third sister was poisoned by is pie. She had to tell Chu Luchen about it in case he accidentally bumped into it. Originally, it was a dispute between the beauties, but now it had become a dispute between the outer court. What he threatened Xiao Caihuan that day was not entirely a threat. It was not a simple matter that the tributes of the Su state, which had been in the treasury, disappeared. If it was really found that it had something to do with Duke Xing's mansion, even if Duke Xing's mansion was powerful, it would inevitably be implicated, and the result would be unknown. This matter has come to an end. My uncle flew into a rage in the main hall and saw a large number of officials of the treasury being implicated. Many people were implicated, and Vice Minister Wang was also in a bad situation. Although we can't find out that it has something to do with him, it is certain that his daughter has been poisoned by this kind of incense. Now he has been demoted. Chu Luchen knew that she was very uninformed in the deep palace, so he looked at her and said with a smile. Talking about business, the blush on Xiao Wanru's face slowly faded, and she looked natural now. If it weren't for the fact that he still put his arms around her and let her lean against his chest, she felt that she would be more at ease at this time. Knowing that she couldn't compete with him with her strength, she might as well let him be. In any case, this person had always been very domineering. Originally, when the two of them hadn't said it out, she already felt that way. Now that it was out, she realized that not only was he domineering, he was also protective of his food. Thinking of this, the blush that had just faded a little came up again. Seeing Xiao Wanru's blushing face again, Chu Liuchen's eyes flashed and he asked lazily, "How should we deal with that girl surnamed Wang?" Xiao Wanru bit her lip, suppressed the shyness in her heart, and said after thinking for a while, "Let her be. Wang Yusin would not be in a good situation now. She had made such a big mistake and even got her father into trouble. The whole Wang's mansion would not protect her. Even if she married far away, she would have to do it without others knowing. She would definitely marry a low-class person, or even a low-class one or two." In the last life, Wang Yusin had Xiao Yanru's helper. Now, although Wang Yusin was still Xiao Yanru's helper, she had removed this helper long ago. What would happen next would depend on Wang Yusin's fate. Chu Luchen thought for a moment and said evilly, "Let her be. Tomorrow, I'll introduce a good husband to her and find a businessman to marry her." "Find a businessman?" Xiao Wanru raised her face in surprise. The status of a businessman was not high. Wang Yusin, who wanted to stay in the consort selection, could only marry a businessman in the end. How could she, who was quite arrogant, bear it? "Of course I'm going to find a businessman, but I'm afraid it's not easy to find one now," Chu Luchen said lazily. With a flash in her eyes, Xiao Wanru raised the corners of her mouth and pinched the handkerchief with her fingers. She had always been a cold person and would not be kind to someone who had harmed her. Wang Yusin deserved to end up like this. "When you're free, I'll take you to the Wang's mansion to have a look and pick a good garden." Chu Luchen looked at her soft and beautiful side face with a playful smile. Her long eyelashes cast uneven shadows on her eyelids, which made her look very lovely. Originally, he was just joking, but at this time, he unconsciously became a little more serious. "Why should I pick?" Xiao Wanru didn't keep up with his thoughts for a moment. She raised her head in astonishment and looked sideways at him. "Pick a good one. I can take it as my bridal chamber and use it when I marry you. Since it will be the two of us living in the future, we should naturally satisfy you," Chu Luchen said. His words made Xiao Wanru blush again. She secretly gritted her teeth. He really had the nerve to say that. Chu Luchen laughed sullenly. His usually clear voice sounded a little hoarse because of the sullenly suppressed laughter, but it made people feel that his laughter was coming from the heart. It was a little soft and sweet, but also a little inexplicable shame and annoyance. Xiao Wanru simply ignored him and turned her head to look at the bookshelf on one side. He was a prince, but he used to look very lonely. Even if he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Why did he seem to be a different person now? Chapter 757. Are you angry? Seeing Xiao Wanru turn her face awkwardly, Chu Luchen knew that enough was enough, so he said softly. He reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's messy hair and stroked it twice, which reminded Xiao Wanru of the chubby cat she raised. Did she usually smooth the cat's hair like this? Don't be angry. Tell me what you want. Are you used to living in the palace? If not, I'll ask Imperial Grandmother to take you to her place. In the past, there were beauties accompanying the Empress Dowager in the harem. Chu Luchen said. He was afraid that she would suffer losses in Chuxiu Palace. Feeling sweet in her heart, she lowered her head and shook her head. Don't bother Empress Dowager. I'm fine. It's okay to live in Chuxiu Palace. It's far from the harem. It's not good to live too close. It was not easy to be around the Empress Dowager, especially in such a situation where she was not in a proper position. It was easy to become a target for others. Don't worry. Xiao Yanru is a ready-made target now. I'm safe here. Xiao Wanru was afraid that he would really go to the Empress Dowager, so she added worriedly. She said it with great certainty, and a smile appeared in her watery eyes. The harem had its own way of survival, and the previous dynasty had its own way of survival. If she intervened rashly, it would be easy to cause trouble. She didn't know what happened to Chu Luchen in the last life, but the bloody steps in her memory and so many dead women all showed the tragedy at that time. Who was he fighting with? It seemed that he had no opponents at that time, and all the opponents were too weak for him at that time. When the emperor was seriously ill, the so-called supervising crown prince was already considered to have ascended to the throne. Those who could seize the throne were either dead, injured, or weak. Who could be a match for him? But why would there be such a scene in her memory? There was another thing that she had never understood. In that case, why did Chu Luyue listen to Xiao Yanru's words at all costs and kill her? Why did he do that? Did she have any value that he didn't know? Alright, if there's anything you can't handle, just tell this king. This king naturally has a way to deal with it. Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Chu Luchen smiled and nodded. He looked at Xiao Wanru's messy hair and said, I'll ask Yujie to comb it for you later. It's messy. After saying that, he very naturally stroked her silky hair again, then moved his head closer, his warm breath almost hitting her face. It won't grow out during the consort selection, how about this prince combs your hair at that time? Prince. Xiao Wanru tried to tilt her head back to avoid his face, and her face involuntarily became hot. Combing her hair. How could he think of such a thing? How could he, a dignified Prince Chen, do such a thing? Wang Ye, why are you here? She blushed and changed the topic. Even in her 2 lives, she had never seen such a shameless person. One moment, he was as handsome and elegant as an immortal, the next moment, he was as evil and enchanting as a playboy, and he dared to say anything. Chu Luchen looked at the blush on the girl's jade-like face, which was like a white jade with a slight blemish. Her thin lips were tightly pursed, and she tried hard to make a dignified look. However, such a delicate and beautiful look, coupled with a pair of bright and watery eyes, made people feel pity for her no matter how they looked at her. She was obviously shy and uneasy, but she tried hard to be calm, which was really funny. Of course, Chu Luchen also knew that his laughter would definitely make her angry out of shame, so he simply pretended not to notice her forced calm look and said, I happened to have something to do and was looking for the picture album, so I passed by. Where's Madame O? Xiao Wanru listened carefully, but at this time, there was no sound from Madame O, who should have been there. Maybe he had something to do when this king came, so he left. Chu Luchen said casually. Of course, he would not say that he deliberately lured the female painter away. Why didn't you come to me when you were free? That place has been empty, and the scenery is much better than here. Chu Luchen said. I'll go there next time when I'm free. Seeing Chu Liuchen's burning eyes fall on her face, Xiao Wanru lowered her head in embarrassment. Inexplicably, she felt that her heart was beating fast and almost couldn't control it. She pinched the handkerchief harder and said, there are so many people in the imperial palace, and it's noisy. I'm afraid that someone will find out. So what? You've passed the halfway point now. Even if someone finds out, it doesn't matter. Of course, if you worry too much, I can think of a way so that you don't have to avoid me too much. Chu Luchen said with a smile. What way? Xiao Wanru asked curiously. Xiao Wanru didn't expect that Xiao Yanru would really use the way that Chu Luchen joked about before she used it. Chu Luchen left after talking with Xiao Wanru for a while. Xiao Wanru stayed and sat for a while. Yujie tidied up her messy hair and clothes. When Madame O came back, she was sitting there quietly and reading the picture album. After Madame O apologized to her, the two of them evaluated some paintings. After that, Xiao Wanru came back from Madame O's place. As soon as she arrived at the gate of the imperial palace, she saw a figure flash by. Yu Jie took a few steps forward and quickly grabbed the person. It was the palace maid named Han Dan. Xiao Wanru looked the palace maid up and down and asked, "Why did you run away after seeing me?" I didn't see you, fifth miss." Han Dan stammered. "Do you think that we are blind and can't see you hiding here on purpose?" Yu Jie was so angry that she laughed. She pulled Han Dan's finger and pointed to the place where she had hidden before. "You monitored the moves of the beauties in the imperial palace and followed them. If this matter is reported to the nanny in charge, you should be in serious trouble." Xiao Wanru looked at Han Dan calmly and said, "Fifth Miss Xiao, I'm really useless. I was just working and didn't notice that Fifth Miss Xiao came." Han Dan denied it and knelt down in front of Xiao Wanru with a plop, looking extremely pitiful. When a passing beauty saw the scene in front of her, she stopped and looked at Xiao Wanru in astonishment. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. This palace maid was really not a simple person. Her behavior immediately made people feel that she was weak and she was the one who bullied the weak. In the imperial palace, no matter which family's daughter was, no one dared to be presumptuous. Wang Yusin was a good example. She knew that Xiao Wanru couldn't do anything to her. "Get up. Since you don't admit it, it's okay. If Big Sister knew that you were the witness that day, I don't know if she would still want to use you." Xiao Wanru glanced at the trembling palace maid calmly and said in a very low voice. He looked at the pitiful palace maid and said in a very low voice. After he finished speaking, he saw the palace maid's eyes widen in surprise. Satisfied, he lifted the corner of his skirt and walked inside. She ignored the palace maid's matter. When the passing beauty saw the scene in front of her, she didn't understand what was going on. She looked at the palace maid kneeling on the ground with a pale face and then looked at Xiao Wanru, who left leisurely. She shook her head, ignored this matter, and walked out. It was just a little palace maid's matter. Moreover, Fifth Miss Xiao didn't do anything to a little palace maid, so it was not a big deal. After the beauty left, Han Dan, who was kneeling on the ground, suddenly came to her senses. She hurriedly got up and chased after Xiao Wanru. When she got close to Xiao Wanru, she lowered her voice and said, Fifth Miss, please wait. What else can I do for you?" Xiao Wanru stopped slightly but did not turn around. However, Yu Jie turned her head and glared at Han Dan fiercely with great dissatisfaction. "Fifth Miss, it was the first miss who asked me to see if you had come back." Han Dan didn't dare to hide it and answered. If the fifth miss told her that she had testified that the first Miss Xiao acted stealthily and conspired with the maid, she would definitely get into trouble. The first Miss Xiao was not easy to deal with, and the fifth Miss Xiao was even more difficult to deal with. At this time, Han Dan also regretted that she had tried to please the two of them at that time. She had thought that the two of them were both noble and good-natured, but she didn't expect that she had misjudged them. Neither of them was easy to deal with, but now she could only go down and couldn't turn back even if she wanted to. "Big Sister, what happened?" Xiao Wanru's butterfly-like long eyelashes fluttered and she said slowly. With Xiao Yanru's cautiousness, it was impossible for her to do such a thing unless the benefits of this matter were really great. "Prince Yu is at the first Miss's place." Han Dan gritted her teeth and had to tell the truth. She couldn't keep the fifth Miss Xiao here, and she would definitely see it when she went back. "Why is Prince Yu here?" Xiao Wanru listened carefully with rapt attention. This matter was so mysterious that she had to ask. Chuxiu Palace was the place where the consort selection was held. Before the dust settled, the princes had to avoid arousing suspicion. No one knew who would be chosen in the end. It could be one's own family, or it could be one's own brother. It could even be the emperor's woman in the imperial palace. In this case, it was inconvenient for everyone to come here before the official selection was made. Chu Liuyue's arrival was very strange. When the first Miss Xiao went out in the afternoon, she fell from the rockery. Prince Yu happened to pass by and saved her. He also asked the imperial physician to come and treat her. At this time, he is still in the first Miss Xiao's room. Since she had already started, Han Dan certainly wouldn't hide it anymore and told everything in detail. Xiao Wanru was stunned at first, and then she burst into laughter with a sweet smile. This method was really the same as what Chu Luqian had said before. They were indeed brothers, and their ideas were so similar. Of course, Chu Luqian just joked at that time, but Chu Luiyue was impatient. He immediately came to Xiao Yanru's side because of this matter, and it seemed that he was supporting Xiao Yanru. It was hard for them to come up with this idea. They happened to meet Prince Yu when they fell, and then they got involved. It was always easy to leave a good impression when a hero saved a beauty, not to mention that the one he saved was such a charming beauty. Come on, let's go to see Big Sister. Xiao Wanru said with a smile and stepped forward with her eyes shining like colored glaze. She wanted to see what the two of them wanted to do together this time. She knew that Xiao Yanru would not resign herself to fate. Chapter 758. Xiao Wanru had to pass Xiao Yanru's room before entering her room. When she arrived at the door of Xiao Yanru's room, a little eunuch suddenly came out in a hurry and almost bumped into Xiao Wanru. Yu Jie pulled her back and took a step back to avoid the little eunuch. The little eunuch didn't expect that there would be someone here. After being stunned for a moment, he suddenly bowed deeply to Xiao Wanru and asked with a smile, "Are you the fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion?" "Yes, my master," Yu Jie said. Xiao Wanru also looked the little eunuch up and down. He was a little eunuch whom she didn't know. Should he be Chu Liuyue's man? Now he even sent a little eunuch here. Did he attach great importance to Xiao Yanru? "Fifth Miss, our prince wants to ask about the first Miss Xiao." "Fifth Miss, please come in," the little eunuch said with a smile, as if he had come out not to find medicine but to invite Xiao Wanru. Xiao Yanru, who was lying on the bed in the inner room, changed her face dramatically and grasped a corner of the quilt with hatred. The palace maid who surrendered to her was also a useless one. She failed to stop Xiao Wanru and let her come over. She winked at Shuqi, who was standing aside. Shuqi looked at her hesitantly and then looked at the imperial physician sitting in the chair beside the bed who was feeling her pulse. Although the imperial physician was old, he was still a man. If she also went out, there would be only her master and the imperial physician in the room. Seeing that Shuqi was hesitant and kept glancing at the old imperial physician, Xiao Yanru also realized it. She took a deep breath and waved her other hand slightly, indicating that Shuqi didn't need to go out. It was indeed inconvenient at this time, but she was eager to know what Chu Luiyue had said to Xiao Wanru. "Imperial physician, how is my injury?" Xiao Yanru asked. "It should be fine, but you may have sprained your tendon. Be more careful these days." The imperial physician put down his hand and said slowly. In fact, it was really nothing serious. The imperial physician had just diagnosed it, but Prince Yu felt that he couldn't be careless about the beauties even if it was a trivial matter. In particular, the beauties had just been poisoned and disfigured. At that time, it might lead to another thing, so he had better be careful. The imperial physician could only come in for the second time to feel the first Miss Xiao's pulse. In order to show his attention, he specially asked the little eunuch of Prince Yu to go to the Imperial Institute of Hospital to get some ointment for the first Miss Xiao's sprained ankle. It was the servant girl who said this, but she also said that it was not very serious. Since it was not very serious, it was more appropriate to let the servant girl of the first Miss Xiao apply the medicine by herself. In the process of feeling the pulse just now, he found that the first Miss Xiao's pulse was also extremely calm. It seemed that she was startled and had palpitations, but there was nothing else. Xiao Yanru said. "Thank you." Yanru said. "The imperial physician." Xiao Yanru said. Xiao of. Yanru Xiao. Shao. 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 Yenru of Shao. Yenru. Shuqi, Shao, Shao of, Yenru should he prince. Yanqi, you. Shao and prince, Shuqi, it was. Shan. Shouldn't Prince Yu be by her bed at this time? Why did he go out and leave a little eunuch to listen to his orders? When the little eunuch saw Xiao Wanru, he even made an appointment with Xiao Wanru for Chu Luiyue. If Chu Luiyue hadn't planned to do so, the little eunuch would never have done so. She had thought that Chu Luiyue might not stay in her room for the sake of her reputation. She had asked Shuqi to check on him and found that Chu Luiyue was waiting in a pavilion not far from their room. It seemed that he was also very worried about her. After the imperial physician felt her pulse once, he felt her pulse again out of concern, which made Xiao Yenru sure that Chu Luiyue was worried about her. But why did he ask Xiao Wanru to go there? Xiao Yenru inexplicably felt that it was dangerous. It was not convenient for her to go out. It was best for Shuqi to go out. Shuqi had packed up the medicine box. She took out a bulging pouch from her sleeve and handed it to the imperial physician. Thank you for coming here. Maybe I will have to trouble you in the future. The imperial physician took it with a smile, picked up the medicine box and walked out. Shuqi sent him out. The little eunuch and Xiao Wanru at the door had already left. He walked to the corridor and looked at the pavilion where Prince Yu had been before. As expected, he saw the fifth miss standing there and bowing to Prince Yu. He stopped walking slightly. Why did Prince Yu want to see the fifth miss? The imperial physician also stood in the corridor, looked at the servant girl who came out in the name of sending him out, and then looked at Prince Yu in the pavilion calmly. He turned around and left quietly. He had thought that the first Miss Xiao was a well-mannered person, but it turned out that she was just spying on Prince Yu. It was said that the first Miss Xiao had a good reputation. Now it seemed that she was just SOSO and had ulterior motives. Other people in the imperial palace didn't know what had happened in the Su state before, but several imperial physicians in the Imperial Institute of Medicine were very clear about it. The first Miss Xiao was involved in it. It was said that the one who went out of the mansion was the third miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Now the one invited by Prince Yu should be the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. The imperial physician shook his head and carried the medicine box on his back again. The first Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion was not a magnanimous person. She could even hurt a blood sister. Was there anyone else she couldn't hurt? She was not trustworthy. Xiao Yenru had never expected that a small negligence today would cause a disaster caused by the imperial physician's distrust of her in the future. Chu Luiyue stood in the pavilion with his hands clasped behind his back. His bright eyes fell on Xiao Wanru with a bit of scrutiny and coldness. Xiao Wanru came over with the little eunuch. After bowing deeply to him, she lowered her head and stood aside. The wind blew, fluttering her loose dress, making her waistline even more slender. Under the thick winter clothes, her slender figure could be seen. Chu Liuyue's eyes became deep. "Fifth miss, do you still remember me?" Chu Luiyue said. The lines on his face were very clear, and his natural cold aura could easily make people feel oppressed. Such a person gave people a sense of majesty, as if such a person would not do something shameful behind the scenes. But in fact, he not only did something shameful, but also did a lot of shameful things with Xiao Yenru, which could not be exposed to the public. In the end, it was even him who ordered her to die. She took a deep breath. The cold air rushed into her nose and suppressed the feeling of blood in her heart. It made her clearly realize who she was now and who the person in front of her was. Today, she was no longer a small painter who Chu Luiyue could punish at will. "Your Highness, we have met several times," Xiao Wanru said respectfully. She did not raise her head and only looked at the corner of the bluestone ground in front of her. Although her behavior was respectful, her tone was very cold. She did not look like a miss from an aristocratic family who would be shy when seeing him. Chu Luiyue frowned and felt a little uncomfortable. The meaning of her words made him very unhappy, as if he was the one who came up to strike up a conversation. When we first met in Jiangzhou, the fifth miss was still young. I didn't expect that the fifth miss has grown up. Chu Luiyue said slowly. Although his voice still sounded cold, it was different from the previous cold momentum. It was slightly soft. Her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's beautiful hair, which was simply tied with a very simple pearl hairpin. Her beautiful hair was like a cloud, and then she couldn't see anything else. Her eyebrows were lowered, and her attitude was extremely respectful. Her attitude was even more gentle. This beautiful girl who was as beautiful as a flower actually had such a temperament. It was more and more admirable. However, he also wanted to find out the truth behind this gentleness and respect. She was not of age yet. This kind of temperament was really rare. In fact, his mansion needed this kind of girl who could be steady at any time. In the past, Chu Luiyue had always thought that Xiao Yanru's temperament was extremely steady among the misses from aristocratic families, and he admired her very much. However, the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him seemed to be more steady, even though she was younger than Xiao Yanru. I was unreasonable in Jiangzhou and offended Prince Yu, Xiao Wanru said. She answered methodically. It has been 3 years since we parted from each other in Jiangzhou. If I had known that the fifth miss would eventually choose a candidate, I should have made friends with the fifth miss at that time. Chu Luiyue became gentle. His words seemed to be very generous without any personal feelings. However, if others heard it, they would definitely suspect that there was something between them at that time, so that Prince Yu said such words in such a regretful voice. Who can predict what happened in the past, just like no one can predict what will happen in the future? If Prince Yu has nothing to do, I will go to see my big sister first. I heard that she fell and I don't know how she is doing. Xiao Wanru raised her head and said with a slight smile. After that, she bowed sideways and turned to leave. This kind of frivolous attitude was almost different from her respectful attitude just now. Chu Luiyue looked at Xiao Wanru in surprise. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would really dare to do this. Did she know who she was talking to? Fifth Miss Xiao, aren't you going to ask the first Miss Xiao how she fell? With a thought, he blurted out the words, and a faint smile appeared on his cold face. Such a woman was not only exceedingly beautiful, but also had an interesting temperament. After saying that, he turned around, walked in front of Xiao Wanru in a few steps, and blocked her way. The pavilion was small, and there was only one step to the exit. Chu Luiyue stood at the entrance of the pavilion. If Xiao Wanru wanted to leave, she would have to squeeze past him. Of course, it was extremely indecent. Xiao Wanru calmed down and then slowly raised her head. Originally, she didn't want to get in touch with Chu Luiyue. As Chu Luiyue, who had directly killed her in the last life, she couldn't afford to offend him now. Naturally, she didn't intend to provoke him at this time. But now it was obvious that Chu Luiyue didn't intend to let her go like this. She didn't know whether it was Chu Luiyue's idea or Xiao Yanru's. But no matter who it was, she wouldn't escape if she couldn't. Your Highness, since you know, can you tell me about my big sister? Xiao Wanru slowly took a step back, slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and said with a sweet smile. Shuqi, who was in the corridor, saw Chu Luiyue stop Xiao Wanru in the pavilion. Her face changed greatly, and she hurriedly turned around and entered the room. As soon as she entered the door, she saw a person under the window and almost screamed in fear. Chapter 759. Shut up. Xiao Yanru said gloomily. Shuqi hurriedly shut up, pulled herself together, closed the door with her backhand, and walked to the window. A corner of the gauze curtain in front of the window was lifted. The window faced the corridor outside and the pavilion where Prince Yu was. Miss, Prince Yu stopped the fifth miss from leaving. Shuqi came up to Xiao Yanru, who was standing in front of the window and peeking through the gauze curtain, and reported in a low voice. Xiao Yanru's face was almost furious, and her face was as gloomy as the calm before the storm. She stood motionless in front of the window and looked at the pavilion outside quietly. The two people in the pavilion, the woman was beautiful, and the man was handsome and noble. They looked very pleasing to the eye, as if they were a match made in heaven. However, in Xiao Yanru's eyes, there was deep resentment. Prince Yu belonged to her, and she had fallen in love with him since she was a child. How dare Xiao Wanru covet him? She would definitely let that bitch die a horrible death. She pulled a corner of the window curtain with her hand, clenched it hard, and looked at the pavilion coldly. Seeing that her face was very terrible, Shuqi didn't dare to say anything more. She stood behind her and looked at the opened window, and even breathed carefully. As Xiao Yanru's principal maid, Shuqi certainly understood Xiao Yanru's intention. Prince Yu, whom the first miss cared about most, had an unusual relationship with the fifth Mississippi. The first miss was about to fly into a rage at this time. In the pavilion, Xiao Wanru's eyes were extremely calm. Her watery eyes, which were a little misty, looked particularly gentle, as if there were glistening water in them. As a girl under 15 years old, even if she stood in front of others gracefully, she still had an indescribable charm. Her bright lips made people involuntarily fall on her cherry lips. Her lips were extremely beautiful, which made people feel warm in their hearts. Although she asked Xiao Yanru, and it sounded like she cared about her, she asked after being stopped by him. It could be seen that she didn't want to ask or talk to him at first. This kind of feeling made Chu Luiyue dissatisfied. His eyes fell on her face again. When he first met her in the palace that day, 3 years later, he was almost shocked for a moment. He didn't expect that it was her, the little girl he met in Jiangzhou, who climbed over the wall and came out. A girl changed 18 times before she grew up. Your Highness, can you tell me about Big Sister? Xiao Wanru said impatiently and tilted her head slightly to one side, unwilling to face Chu Luiyue's gaze. Today, shortly after I came out of the Empress's palace, I met the first Miss Xiao at the rockery. The first Miss Xiao should want to salute me, but I didn't expect that she would step on air and fall. After I asked someone to bring her here, I invited the imperial physician. Just now, the imperial physician also said that she was fine. Chu Luiyue coughed and said, "Thank you, Your Highness Prince Yu." Xiao Wanru bowed sideways. No matter how Xiao Yanru fought with her, in the eyes of outsiders, they were one, and both of them were lineal daughters of Duke Xing's mansion. But she didn't understand what Chu Luiyue meant. Did it mean that Xiao Yanru was seducing him, but he actually had nothing to do with Xiao Yanru? Whether or not there was such a thing between the two of them, what did it have to do with him? Moreover, others didn't know the relationship between the two of them, but how could she not know? In the last life, even if Xiao Yanru entered the palace and was separated from Chu Luiyue by seniority, the two of them still got together. I heard that what happened to the third Miss Xiao has something to do with the fifth Miss Xiao, right? Chu Luiyue asked unhappily. Xiao Wanru looked up at him speechlessly. Didn't he find that she was unwilling to talk and end the topic? The previous topic had ended. Why did he start another topic? She glanced at Xiao Yanru's room. The door was closed tightly, as if there was no one inside, but she clearly knew that Xiao Yanru was inside. With Xiao Yanru's temperament, she must have been distracted to do such a thing. She was deceiving herself and trying to cover it up. Was it because of Chu Luiyue? Thinking of this, it was true. In the last life, the two of them colluded closely, which showed the relationship between them. Now Chu Luiyue actually said that Xiao Yanru was seducing him. Even if Xiao Yanru couldn't hear what they said, she must have seen Chu Luiyue stop her here. A corner of the gauze curtain at the window was slightly raised. Xiao Yanru raised the corners of her mouth silently and couldn't keep calm. It was a good thing that Xiao Yanru couldn't keep calm, but she really didn't want to say anything more to Chu Luiyue here. Every time she saw Chu Luiyue, she would think of her tragic ending in the last life and couldn't calm down. Maybe it would take a while for her to really hide this anger in her heart, but now she really couldn't calm down. In fact, I don't know what's going on. Your Highness, I want to see my big sister first. She has closed the door. She may be angry with me now. Xiao Wanru reached out and pointed at Xiao Yanru's door. Chu Luiyue turned his eyes and saw Xiao Yanru's tightly closed door. A trace of displeasure rose in his heart. Like Xiao Wanru, he also knew Xiao Yanru's character well. Given her character and she had always been able to keep calm, how could she do such a petty thing? Looking at the half-lifted curtain, Xiao Yanru frowned silently. Xiao Yanru was becoming more and more improper now. She deliberately fell in front of him this time, but now she was peeping from the window with the door closed. After thinking for a while, he leaned to one side and made way for her. Fifth Miss, go to see First Mississippi. It happens that I'm going to see her together. After saying that, he turned around and walked out. Since they were going the same way, Xiao Wanru had no choice but to follow him. They turned to the door of Xiao Yanru's room one after the other. The little eunuch went up to knock on the door. The door was unlocked. Hearing the knock, footsteps came from inside. Shuchi, the maid, appeared at the door in a hurry, as if she had just come out. Greetings, Your Highness. Greetings, Fifth Mississippi. Seeing the people at the door, Shuchi hurriedly bowed and lowered her head. Even so, the two of them still saw the panic on Shuchi's face. How is your first miss? Chu Luiyue asked. My first miss's foot may have a sprain. The imperial physician just said. Shuchi hesitated for a moment, as if she didn't know what to say for a while. Her look indicated that Xiao Yanru was in trouble. Xiao Wanru stood behind Chu Luiyue calmly and quietly watched what they were going to do. Chu Luiyue frowned and said, if it's still not good, go to the imperial physician again. Yes, Your Highness. My miss asked me to thank you. If you hadn't happened to pass by, I'm afraid that she wouldn't have been able to get a good treatment. The imperial physician just said that if we delayed for a while, my miss's foot injury would be much more serious. Shuchi bowed respectfully again and said gratefully. It doesn't matter. Chu Luiyue turned around and Xiao Wanru made way for him. Fifth Miss, please take care of First Miss. Chu Luiyue said. Xiao Wanru didn't answer. She bowed sideways and then stood with her head down, unable to continue. Chu Luiyue frowned again. The girl in front of him seemed to be very gentle, but she seemed to be a little stupid and didn't know how to answer him. All the misses from aristocratic families he met would immediately come up to answer him shyly when they saw him. Even if they had nothing to say, they would bring up some topics. What was more, he gave her a topic, but she seemed to be unable to grasp it. He slightly lowered his eyes and pursed his lips. Fifth Miss, I have to trouble you to help me find out whether someone framed First Mississippi. Every time the beauties enter the palace for the draft, there are always such things. Some beauties who are likely to be selected fail to be selected because of some accidents. When Chu Luiyue said this, his face was cold, with the dignity he always had. Not to mention the misses from aristocratic families who were raised in boudoir, even the officials in the court did not dare to offend his dignity at this time. The officials all knew that Prince Yu was the most dignified among the princes. But the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him didn't seem to like him, nor was she afraid of him. Xiao Wanru smiled faintly and raised her eyes slightly. Her eyes were calm and gentle. Your Highness, I have to trouble the supervisor nanny to find out why Big Sister appeared there, whether there was someone in the palace who tipped off Big Sister, why did they frame Big Sister, and who benefited the most from it. She spoke with confidence and composure. She was neither fawning nor humble, as if she was talking about an ordinary thing. She didn't hear the other meaning in Chu Luiyue's words. Chu Luiyue frowned more deeply. He didn't like this feeling. His eyes swept over her little face, which was like a blooming spring flower. After the initial amazement, he was just amazed. Although he felt moved, it was really nothing compared with his great ambition. But this kind of complete neglect and even contempt made him very uncomfortable. He stared at Xiao Wanru deeply. Seeing that there was no shyness on her face, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. With a cold snort, he turned around and strode back. The little eunuch made an obeisance by cupping his hands to Xiao Wanru and hurriedly followed her. His master, who had always been emotionless and indifferent, seemed to be a little different. The little eunuch could still sense it, so he didn't dare to look down on the fifth Miss Xiao in front of him. "Shuqi, how is big sister?" Xiao Wanru walked inside and asked Shuqi, who was still standing there in a daze. "Ah. Oh, the first miss is inside." Shuqi looked outside and saw that Prince Yu had strode away. She could only turn around helplessly and follow Xiao Wanru inside. The first miss actually wanted Prince Yu to come in and talk with him in private. But now that Prince Yu had left, she didn't dare to stop him. In the room, Xiao Yanru sat on the bed with a livid face. She heard the conversation outside clearly. When she saw Chu Luyue coming, she went back to the inner room excitedly to lie down. Unexpectedly, Chu Luyue just asked and didn't come in. Then her efforts were really in vain. "Big sister, how are you now?" Xiao Wanru came in, looked at Xiao Yanru and asked lightly, at least 1 foot away from the bed. When there were no outsiders, Xiao Wanru really didn't bother to pretend to be close to her. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.